Hi, everyone. This is Reinette Senum with Reinette Senum's foghornexpress.substack.com. It's raining. It's lovely. It's about ready to snow, and I've got a nice little, gas stove here for the ambiance for all of you to enjoy. And I've been thinking long and hard, and I'm been really mulling over whether or not I should discuss what I'm about to discuss. And some of what I'm going to be sharing, I shared last night during our Save Our Skies Swarm webinar. That was a very enlightening and fast and quick and mind-blowing webinar that went on for 2 hours and 40-some minutes with Jim Lee of ClimateViewer.com and Jeff Ray, our Save Our Skies meteorologist. And so I recorded this. That recording is going to follow what I have to say right now. I did not record the part where I was speaking. I did not get into it until Jeff Ray was getting into the science behind reading the skies. And so that first part is a little heady and intense, but then it gets more digestible right afterwards. But when I was speaking, I was speaking to the current narrative that is spinning around geoengineering, and it's really off course, and it's been off course for a long time. And as the awareness is growing more and more, the correct narrative, the narrative we have found to be true, is not getting out there like it should. And there's a lot of misleading misinformation out there for a variety of different reasons. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm here in Northern California town in Nevada City. I was raised in this county since I was 4, about 25 minutes from where I am right now. And I have been a truth teller and have made some friends and made a really impressive list of enemies as well. And I feel it's imperative that I speak the truth, and sometimes speaking the truth is the most difficult route. And I will be sharing some truths right now that need to be clarified. And I'm not going after the people, I'm going after the facts. I want to make that very, very clear. But this information that is spinning around in the geoengineering world is misleading us. And as long as we continue to believe certain things, we're never going to get to the truth, and our efforts are never going to be effective. Now, to let you know, as being a former two-time mayor and council person and engaged in activism, I've been doing this for well over 20 years, getting close to 25 years. And I have been the type of person who's always been able to gather from people what's the problem, what's the issue, what's the solution. And I've always had the capacity to clear the path from point A to get people to point B. I do consider myself a solutionarian. I like to tackle problems and find creative solutions for them. That's what I love, and I eat that up. And so I have been aware of geoengineering since, I don't know, 2005, 2007, somewhere around there. And I thought it was one thing. I thought, okay, this is what it is. And I was convinced of that because that was the information that was out there that was the most prevalent. And when COVID struck, dropped it all, and I had to go back to, geoengineering. Once COVID died down, I can get back onto, okay, I can focus on our skies once again. I was highly engaged. In fact, back in 2016, as seen on this YouTube video, it was raining one day. We're down in Sacramento having a geoengineering protest at the Capitol. And the organizer grabbed me and said, Reinette, we don't have our MC. Can you do it? And I was made to the MC within minutes. And I emceed a geoengineering protest. And at that time, I was convinced of what I was seeing in the skies. Now you fast forward to 2025, and since I decided to go back to fighting geoengineering and clearing our skies, I have done a complete 180 in what I understand geoengineering to be, the assault in the skies, what it really is. I realize that whether by design or not, the information I had at hand was actually misleading. And I want to say to people that what we're sharing in this webinar, that I will be having follow what I'm saying right now, is controversial. And people have a really hard time digesting what we have to say because it's not what they've been told over and over and over again. And I want to say this. I'm 59 in a month, heading towards 60. These are the last few years of my life. And I have lived a life of a lot of extreme adventures and doing whatever I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And I've had a very full, big, satisfying life. And I'm now confined to being on this screen a lot, doing very boring, laborious administrative work. Why? Because I'm trying to gather the information that from my own research is the most solid, credible narrative of what geoengineering really is and what it is not, that's going to get us a win in the end. And when I put this information forward and people attack me and they say nasty things about me personally rather than staying on point, they've already lost that debate, by the way. If you can't like fight the facts, then you've lost. But when this happens, I have to say to people like, look at folks, I don't think you understand that day in, day out, I'm sitting there and with a little needle and I just keep working on this and working on and working and working and working, trying to push the needle a little further. And what I've done, like what I've done in the past, and I've got decades history of this, is I go out there, look at the problem, gather the best people, like whatever my weaknesses are, I go out and I find the people that have that as their strengths, bring them in, coalesce everyone, take all that information, and then again, try to get us from point A to point B, which is the solution. And my job is to clear that path and get us there. That's how I function. And I've been doing that in the geoengineering world as well. The anti-geoengineering folks have been working on really getting to the bottom, to the science, to the data, to the evidence, to the proof. They're the ones who are not really being heard. And what I have, to my own research, my own conclusion thus far, and it could change according to the information that I receive day by day, what I have been led to believe what geoengineering really is not what I thought just over 2 years ago at all. And all I can say is when people start yelling and screaming at me, calling me names or saying you're full of it, blah, 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 look at folks, I'm the one that's going to be investing hundreds, if not thousands of hours into this fight. I'm the one right now who's been working on the petition for rulemaking, I should say, to send to the FAA, Cal EPA, and the EPA. And I have here Jim Lee, who we took on as a consultant, to include as a documentation, as the evidence, as the science, as the stats, everything that we need to convince the FAA, the Cal EPA, and the EPA that they've not been doing their job. There's hundreds and hundreds of studies backing this up. And when people start saying that we're full of it and we're, CIA agents and we're chaos agents, whatever shills, this is what I need to say, is I am not going to waste any of the precious years that remain in my life on chasing rainbow unicorns or a dead end. I'm going to invest myself day in, day out in what I believe ultimately is going to lead to a win, which is ultimately going to lead to blue skies. That is something that Save Our Skies team and myself have been researching and going through the data, having hand-holding, and we've ultimately realized that we have to let go of all the preconceived notions in our brains. And our number one objective is not ego, not being right, not getting clicks or subscriptions or anything like that. It's to get to the truth. Because the day I die, I want the last glance I have on the planet is when I'm looking up and I'm seeing a blue sky. That's my objective. And when people have the audacity to call somebody like me, are you a shill? I don't know who you are. It's like, well, first of all, just Google me. I have been engaged in citizenry and being a solutionarian before there was Google. And I have a long, long history of going out there and having audacious dreams and concepts and pursuing them, whether it was putting together an American women's trans-Antarctic expedition when I was in my early 20s, or trading with the South Pole expedition, or crossing Alaska by myself and cutting down 3 trees and building them into a canoe, or becoming the city council and mayor of Nevada City, California, and organizing with the community an organic farmers market, or putting together a homeless warming shelter, or building in 2 days a fleet of micro houses on wheels for the homeless to wheel out into the forests. My point is this. I have been highly, highly, highly engaged in looking at problems, figuring out what the best solution is, bringing in the people according to my weaknesses, so they can fill those gaps. And I have made it my responsibility and my duty and my goal to get to the bottom of what is and what is not geoengineering in order to regain our blue and healthy skies once again. So I do hope that all of you will, and I'm not done yet, by the way, I'm not done. I do hope that you'll continue to watch this into the webinar. It's a long video. I recommend you take chunks of it at a time. It's a lot. It's kind of mind-bending information. It's information people are not aware of. They have not heard of. They're completely like, wait, what are you saying? That's not what I was taught. That's not what I've learned. It's like, yeah, I know. Welcome to my world. So I want to start with this. There's a few truth bombs. There's a few narratives I'm going to be busting up real fast because they are a disservice to getting our blue skies back. First and foremost, I want to say, as many of you know, there has been a viral video of a woman confronting what we've been told over and over again is a chemtrail pilot. I know that this is what people are perceiving the story because they're contacting me saying, hey, Reinette, look at this video. You know, here is this woman, this mother confronting a chemtrail pilot. And while this woman did distinguish in her SUBSTACK that it was a cloud seeding pilot, not a chemtrail pilot, interview after interview, even though cloud seeding may be mentioned once or twice, it is absolutely slathered all over the screen. The hosts are always repeating, the streaks in the sky, and we're bringing it. This woman is bringing the end to it, and the chemtrail pilots, and it has not been clearly made for the public, for the viewer, to understand what cloud seeding is versus chemtrails or stratospheric aerosol injection, which is what people relate chemtrailing to be. Why is this a disservice? Well, because people now think that they can go on their flight radar 24, track a plane, and jump in their car and drive to an airport and confront a chemtrail pilot. That is not the case. You can go on flight radar and you can track a cloud seeding pilot, and more than likely that will be in your area. Jump in your car, and if you can get onto the airport, the tarmac, or inside, you can have a conversation with them. Cloud seeding is highly, highly localized. It is done generally when storms are moving in. It is not the same as what we see, those streaks in the sky whatsoever. And nobody to this day has ever confronted a chemtrail pilot. A cloud seeding, yes, absolutely. Cloud seeding is generally happens with a Cessna airplane, and they're using flares to essentially put out silver iodide. And many times there's also a type of chaff that is included in this. And this is so that they can, through satellite, actually trace where the silver iodide is going to see if they actually hit their mark. This is highly, highly targeted and highly, highly localized. It is not the crisscrosses in the sky whatsoever. So there's a massive confusion around that. And that is doing a disservice because it's making people believe that this individual confronted a chemtrail pilot. Therefore, those streaks in the skies are chemtrails, and we're being misdirected, is what I can say. Is we're being misdirected from, once again, 2 years of research, evidence, legal team, legal researchers, meteorologists, citizen researchers. And through their research and efforts, they have proven to me the current beliefs around geoengineering and its narrative are completely incorrect. And I know I might sound a little mysterious to some of you. That's why you've got to watch our webinar from last night. So there's that. So that has to be clarified. Nobody has ever confronted a chemtrail pilot after watching flight radar and jumping in the car. That has yet to happen. It's cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is with Cessnas 1,000 feet up. So that need to be clarified big time. Now, there's something else that I have to speak to, and this is really, really huge. Essentially, there has been a story continuously circulating that is once again incorrect, and that has to do with gag orders. There has been a story put out there and continues to be put out there that weather reporters, meteorologists have been officially told by the government to shut up around identifying any kind of weather modification, weather manipulation programs going on. And this has been circulating as the answer to when people ask, why don't we know about geoengineering? Why don't we know about these programs? Well, it's because there's a gag order. I thought this was true. So 2 years ago, our legal team from Houston, Texas, we were pursuing this as a First Amendment violation by the federal government. And it was our job to go out there and, most importantly, to find the original source document of that gag order from the federal government telling meteorologists and weather reporters not to talk about weather modification programs. And what we understood ultimately and found out, because we heard from the actual attorneys who could provide that source document. And essentially, this is what they had to say. This actually comes from the legal counsel of what is known as the PEER organization, the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. And what we found out is that there was no source document putting a gag order on weather reporters and meteorologists. This gag order was actually about union negotiation, and this was a confidentiality agreement during the negotiation that they could not discuss what was going on behind the scenes during their collective bargaining agreement. And Richard Hearn, who is the general counsel of the PEER organization as well as executive director, let us know that there 100% unequivocally is no gag order, has never been a gag order on any weather reporters or meteorologists. Now, again, you might start calling me a shill or a CIA agent or something very exciting like that. And I just want to say, all you need to do is don't start pointing the finger at me, but if you think I'm wrong, provide the original source document of the government saying, everyone shut up. You're not going to find it. Why? Because it doesn't exist. Why is this important to clearing our skies? Because the narrative out there is that these nefarious programs are going on, and the only reason why you don't know about it is because of this gag order. That is the reason why you don't know about it. And I have to tell you, that is not a true story. Sorry, truth bomb. If you don't like me, again, just present the source document. The other piece that is really misleading us in our geoengineering fight is this whole entire thing about high bypass turbofan engines. From the same source as the gag order, we are being told that these high bypass turbofan engines do not produce condensation trails. Well, I'm going to challenge all of you to that one. Again, stop calling me names. I can hear you right now. I can hear all of you. I'm going to challenge all of you to go onto ChatGPT, go onto Grok, and you're going to ask a question. Okay, can high bypass turbofan engines create condensation trails? And see what the answer is. I know what the answer is. I've known what the answer is the last couple of years, and we've been applying that to our research and our legal work. But the average person does not know that. And when you say to them, hey, it's this, not that, they go, oh no, you're wrong. These engines do not create condensation trails. That's absolutely 100% false information. Why is it important for you to know this? Because it's leading us down the wrong trail. And as we were discussing last night, I think what's happened, whether it was by design or inadvertently, we have this big bad boogeyman out there. As Jim Lee says, it's the straw man. And we're told to look way out there for the big bad boogeyman. And I guarantee you there's clandestine programs. So this is, by the way, what we're speaking to is not mutually exclusive. It's not one or the other. It can still be both. But the point is this, is while we're out there looking for the needle in the haystack, which are the clandestine programs, we actually have commercial aviation, which are now up to 43 million flights over our heads, that have jet exhaust that we see that is spewing over us, whether you see the condensation trails or not, day in, day out, day in, day out. And that number is rising exponentially. Now, what's important to this as well is that when we have the individual confronting the chemtrail pilot, this individual was stating that her rainwater results showed essentially, I guess, chemtrails, proved chemtrails. Mind you, she was speaking to a cloud seeding pilot, and those rainwater samples do not reflect cloud seeding. They do not reflect chemtrails in the way that we think they are. Those rainwater samples reflect commercial aviation exhaust. This actually is what is coming from the exhaust of the jet fuel itself. And I know this for a fact. Why? Because we, Save Our Skies, paid for 8 of those very specific rainwater samples from this individual. We paid for 8 of them for Save Our Skies for illegal pursuit. And we paid for them, and we saw the results, and they reflected jet exhaust. Nothing else. Jet exhaust. So again, that narrative has to be corrected. It's misrepresentative of what's really going on. And the high bypass turbofan engines is also misrepresentative of what's really going on. And I think what's happened here is that we have been led to look for that needle in the haystack, thinking that that is going to, if we stop it, it's, you know, and get it out of there, it's going to bring back the blue skies. But it's actually the haystack that's the problem. It's right in front of us. It's we don't need to look for the needle. It's the haystack itself. And what is the haystack? It's commercial aviation. And people have a hard time hearing that. Why? Because for years now, they've been convinced by certain other individuals who have been scaring the bejesus out of us, telling us it's these clandestine programs. And again, I'm not saying these are not clandestine programs going on. America has a history of clandestine programs, well documented. This is not an either or. It's not one or the other. My job, the job of our Save Our Skies team, and all the consultants and all the researchers who've been assisting us and holding our hand and opening our eyes, it's been our job to get down to what is real. Why? Because we want to be effective. So ultimately, and we'll get into this, when all the geoengineering legislation started passing in the states, it's fantastic. I think it's great. I give kudos to the people doing it. I give kudos to the legislators who are passing it. There's an awareness that is growing, which is wonderful. But I can tell you, as Jim Lee from ClimateViewer would tell you, and others working in this realm, the way that legislation currently is, you're not going to see a return of your blue skies. Why? Because it's not hitting the nail on the head. They're talking about geoengineering specifically that is coming from the state. It's not addressing the commercial aviation, which is really where our skies are getting whited out. And I know a lot of you have a hard time believing that. It was proven to me. It was proven to me by Jeff Ray, our meteorologist, who came on board a good year and a half, almost 2 years ago, and said, hey, this is what I do. I used to be on an aircraft carrier. It was my job to look at the Radiosonde data that comes every 12 hours from weather people going outside with a weather balloon, letting that radiosonde go up through the atmosphere, collecting all the data of humidity and barometric pressure, particulate matter and temperature and so on. And it was his job to identify where in the atmosphere a jet could take off from the aircraft carrier, fly, and come back without a persistent contrail showing the enemy where the aircraft carrier was. So that was his job. And he was saying, look at you guys, these are persistent contrails, and they're created when the atmospheric conditions are just right. We didn't believe him. But I said, you know what? I'm going to allow you the opportunity to prove yourself. So every day he would say, okay, looking at the Radiosonde data and applying that to the Appleman chart that shows you this graph, and it'll show you where in the atmosphere you can fly where there will not be the right atmospheric conditions to create these persistent contrails that can spread and spread and spread throughout the day. And day in and day out and day in, he would tell me, today you're going to see them, today you're not. You're going to see it at this level, you're going to see it at that level, you're going to see them high, they're going to be low, there's going to be none today. And he was spot on, day in, day out. You can't make this stuff up. We've been teaching this for 2 years at Save Our Skies Swarm Webinar. We've been teaching this, and this has been very, very difficult to get through people's minds because there's already another story in their brain of what geoengineering is. And I know as an activist that whoever gets the story in your head first essentially wins. Why? Because then it becomes our job somehow to extract that story, that fake narrative, that false narrative out of your brain and put the real one in. That is not easy. And so we have been working for 2 years teaching people how to read the skies through flight radar, looking at the NOAA weather reporting, weather modification reporting, how to read the atmospheric conditions, and in really trying to give people the tools so that they can look at the skies and know what they're seeing and know what they're not seeing, and be able to delineate between myth and fact. And our objective is so that you can look up and go, okay, this is the day we should be seeing streaks in the sky, persistent contrails. Or this is the day we should not be seeing them whatsoever. What is that? Why am I seeing a persistent contrail? And guess what? Bingo, eureka, you are actually uncovering a geoengineering clandestine program, right? So if the conditions are such where you should not be seeing it, and you're like, wait a second, what is that? You've just probably found that needle in the haystack. That is what we've been trying to teach people to do. So you know what to expect, and when something's unusual, it'll pop out at you. And we've been teaching that. And that has been also through the most accurate narrative, the most fact-based and scientifically based information that we have at our hands. And to then have individuals continuously go out there, repeat the false narrative that there's a gag order, that's why you don't know about these clandestine programs that are happening everywhere, and to continue the false narrative that these high bypass turbofan engines do not create persistent contrails. Absolutely, it is actually covering and clouding the truth. And then to have the belief that you can use flight radar and track down chemtrail pilots and put them in their place is absolutely also inaccurate, and doing an extraordinary disservice to our fight and to winning. And I'm not calling out the people, I'm calling out the facts and the bad narrative, because we've got to win this. And this is a multi-pronged approach. We are not going to be clearing our skies and reducing the pollution and the whitening of our skies with one solution. This is not a silver bullet solution. This is a multitude of, and a series of silver BBs. And we will actually get, at the very end of the webinar, we get into what the solutions are. And you're going to be surprised. It's not what you're thinking. So again, folks, for those of you who want to call me names and yell at me and say I'm this and that, and I'm just a shill and I'm misdirecting you and blah, 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 all I can say is there is an extraordinary amount of evidence here about how deadly and dangerous commercial aviation really is. And for those of you who think our skies are bad right now, the fact that commercial aviation is skyrocketing and continues to skyrocket, and the numbers of flights are skyrocketing, 10 years from now, today is going to look like the good old days when you look up in the sky. There is going to become a point where you're just not going to see the sun for a long time, and you're certainly not going to be able to see the stars at night. That is what we're trying to fight. And again, my skin is in the game. I've got a lot to lose here, because I'm trying to coalesce all this information, the best advisors, the most tangible, practical, real, evidentiary information that points to what's really going on in our skies. And I'm the most important person to prove it to, because I'm the one that's going to be putting hundreds, if not thousands of hours into this specific fight. And I'm not going to waste my life. I'm not going to waste my time. And if anybody wants to argue me, please do. Feel free. I really encourage you to join us for our next Save Our Skies Swarm webinar. It will be on Wednesday, March 26th. 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then on Tuesday, March 18th, I'm going to have a Clear the Air. And this is for all my paid subscribers as a thank you. We kick around for a couple hours, having conversations, talk about anything and everything under the sun, as long as we can see it. And this is your time to jump on that call as well. And you can ask me live, real time, any questions you may have. And again, I'm going to ask you, don't attack. Don't go after me. Don't go after Jim Lee. Don't go after Jeff Ray. And the importance with what Jeff Ray's been doing, and we discussed this in our Swarm webinar recording that you're going to see here in just a moment, that there's now a plugin in windy.com, which is online, and it is a weather reading platform. And this plugin is a contrail finder. And this contrail finder is now doing what Jeff Ray, the meteorologist, was doing for us, for Save Our Skies, and proving to us that, yes, persistent contrails are a real thing. And as Jim Lee and his team have also shown that, yes, the jet exhaust is what we're finding in our rainwater samples, and we have to go after the commercial aviation industry. And this is why I have made it my goal, petition for rulemaking. All the data, all the science is all here. Thank you, Jim Lee, for putting it all together. Now I've got to print it all out, spend a lot of time getting this all together, sending it to the Cal EPA, sending it to the EPA and the FAA, because why? The legislation that we now have written around all these states are missing the mark. They don't understand what geoengineering is. They don't understand what commercial aviation is actually really doing. They're going after a straw man. And unless they correct the commercial aviation industry, and again, we'll discuss this in this webinar, you're never going to get your blue skies. And we now know that the 1963 Clean Air Act that basically said, yeah, there's commercial aviation, yes, there's particulate matter, yes, there's heavy metal, but it's just the cost of doing business. Well, 1963, we had about 300,000 flights back then. We now have about 43 million flights over the United States every single year. That is why you're seeing them all the time. That's why there's an increase. And as Jim Lee says, everyone has an iPhone, so everyone's now, they're documenting this. But this is what it is, folks. It's not the clandestine programs where they have millions of planes out there who are spraying with nozzles and this and that and blah, blah, blah. Now, am I saying that those don't exist, that there aren't some? Yes, there are, but they're the needle in the haystack. We realize we've got to go after the haystack. It's commercial aviation. And more than likely, the reason why we have been led to look at the boogeyman, to look at the straw man, is so that we don't look at the fossil fuel industry, but I don't believe it's fossils, and we don't look at the aviation industry. This is the dirty little secret they don't want you to know, is that commercial aviation at the amount and the level and the increase that we're going to continue to see is not sustainable. And this is the crux of the matter. And I know I'm pissing off a lot of people right now. But again, don't call me names. Show me your evidence if you think I'm wrong. In the meantime, please enjoy our swarm webinar. We get into the meteorology. It's a bit heady for the first 10, 15 minutes. It's quite heady. But then we get into the windy.com plugin, how you can use it, how you can start reading the skies with just the push of a couple buttons. And this is phenomenal. This is revolutionary in proving our point, because people have been telling us it is not possible, and that is a misguided premise. It's not true. And this little plugin is proving our point. It's revolutionary, actually, in the world of geoengineering. We get into that. Jim Lee gets into the evidence, showing you that, yes, this individual who's been pushing the gag order story and the, high bypass turbofan engine story actually was pointing out decades ago persistent contrails and their dangers, and somehow flipped along the way. Again, we're not going after the people. We're going after the information, the false narrative, and the facts. If you want to debate me, go right ahead, but bring the proof, please. And in the meantime, I want to thank all of you who have been willing to listen, who have been willing to keep your mind open. And once again, please understand that I'm not going to waste my time. And this is going to take some years. And I'm not going to waste my time. I'm in this to win. And I'm in this to get our blue skies back. And I'm in this to ensure that our children's children have the blue skies that we've not had for a long, long time. And if somebody else wants to come at it from a different direction, feel free. If you want to pursue it, the clandestine problems, the clandestine programs, fantastic. I will assist you and advise you where I can. But the way we're pursuing this because we believe this is the path towards a big win. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, keep looking up.
So what this is showing me that starting at 20,418 feet, the temperature dew point difference is 2 degrees Celsius. That's where you're having clouds form or dissipate. But as that radiosonde progressed up through the sky under that balloon, it's moving at about 5 meters per second. So figure a telephone pole per second, basically. It's zipping upwards. So this is showing me that from 21,000 feet all the way up to 36,000 feet, that's a cloud zone. And this is Medford, Oregon. And if I look back to the satellite again, Medford, Oregon is right there. And this satellite view shows on the bottom, it shows the legend. The red, cold, thick clouds. And then the light blue, very thin clouds. If I flick over to another view, which I want to slide this thing over a little bit more, there's actually a better, this is great for contrails, but to show you what the different cloud layers are, this one right here called day cloud phase distinction shows a really nice color coding that identifies the level that the clouds are at. So right here, you see these red ones. I'm waiting for the legend to come up at the bottom. Thin, high ice clouds are the red ones. So you're talking the cirrus clouds where you see it red.
Wow.
If you're looking at, this shows the snow, which is surface snow is green. The land surface is blue. Low water clouds are light blue. So you could see off of San Francisco, there's a lot of low clouds off the coast, but I'm pointing to these red clouds, which are the high white feathery clouds that we see where the jets actually fly up at 30 to 40,000 feet. That's where these red clouds are found. So I know from that Radiosonde data that this approaching band off of California, the West Coast, is largely red. So that's the satellite view showing that those clouds are moving in from the west. So let me go back to the Radiosonde data and show you that that entire area from 20,000 feet up to 35,000 feet was thick high clouds up off of Oregon. If I went to Oakland, that changes to 33,000 feet. 51 to 55 is the temperature dew point depression difference. So you have an area that's much thinner than it was up in Oregon. This ends at about 37,000 feet. Now I want to show you the contrail assessment tool that goes along with this.
So this, I just want to say, you guys, you're kind of getting some of the technological stuff, and it can get a lot more technological. So your heads are probably spinning from this, but he's trying to show you what comes from the Radiosonde weather balloon that goes up every 12 hours, the data that's collected, and then when it's applied to the Appleman chart, what that looks like. This is what Jeff used to read for me every morning and say, okay, Reinette, you're going to see these persistent contrails today. You're not, tomorrow you are, blah, 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 right? So this is what he would read for me, because I didn't have the capacity to read it, to prove to me that it was not the vast majority of what I was seeing were not spraying programs, but the commercial aviation.
Very well said, Reinette. You've been listening really well.
Thanks.
So
can I just stop real fast? I'm saying I'm seeing very low flying planes consistently every single day, regardless of the weather and moisture in the air. Well, that doesn't matter. Some days, and I want to say this, whether or not you're seeing those persistent contrails, throughout the day, every single day we're getting sprayed on by the commercial aircraft industry. So whether or not you see them, you might go, oh, they're not spraying us today. Well, no, actually commercial aviation is still flying, and that nanoparticulate matter is still getting released in the exhaust. So whether you see them or not, whether the atmospheric conditions are right for persistent contrails or not, every single day we've got millions of flights happening, hundreds of thousands of flights happening. So I just want to clarify.
Every single second that engine is on, start to turn off,
Yeah,
we are getting not sprayed, we're getting spewed upon.
Yeah.
Exhaust byproducts of burning fuel. What was in that jet fuel is what we're getting. Right. So if it wasn't refined out, it's coming out.
Right.
So now getting onto that contrail finder, I'm going to zoom in here to I click on that X, and this is in the way. I got to move that guy. Okay, so Contrail Finder is a plugin that you'll find on an app called Windy. So if I click on Contrail Finder, and then I go over and click on High Clouds, I can click on any spot, and I'll click right here near Medford, just north of Medford. And it's going to tell me the heights of all this stuff. So as of 2000, which is 8 p.m. Pacific time, we're 7 hours different than London. It tells you where you have possible contrails formation based on what they call the Schmidt-Appelman chart. And that was invented to preserve the life of our aircrafts by not making it impossible for the enemy to see us. So we would brief the aircraft carrier pilots at 35,000, you're going to be producing a contrail. Don't go there. Stay out of that zone. It might have been 2,000 feet thick that day. We identified that based on that Radiosonde data that we gave them.
Okay, so I want to make it very clear, folks. This is how Jeff knows about this. This is why Jeff reached out to Save Our Skies to say, hey, look I can tell you when and where, at what levels in the atmosphere that you would or would not see persistent contrails based upon my experience on the aircraft carrier dealing with jets. Because when the jets flew off, he had to make sure that they were flying at a level when they returned, they were not having this long, persistent contrail behind them, showing the enemy where the ship was located. When I heard that, I was like, wait, what? That exists? And then he began to prove to me, like, I can actually show you every single day what you're going to see and what you're not going to see. And this, what you're seeing right here with these different levels from 26,000 feet up to 36,000 feet, short contrails possible, long possible, persistent. That, folks, is revolutionary. That is taking the mystery and the accusation and the misunderstanding and misconception of what's going on in our skies. We can now actually go on here every day, just pin over your area where you live specifically. I've been doing it for the last few days, and watch the skies and look at that little chart and see it reflects what you're seeing.
And I got to say, there's a short what do you call it? Teaching mode on the contrail finder. When you first get into it, you'll see that.
Oh, I didn't know. That's neat. That
it gives you how you break the stuff down. So it's telling you that this number here under Appelman, it's telling you that's the minimum temperature you need, minus 45 degrees Celsius. And if it's colder than that, and the humidity is right, that level is going to be a good appropriate level for that. So when you go down to this bottom part, it gives you the check marks for the best areas. And then like in this case, it says minus 45 is what you need, minus 38 is what you have. Even though you have 100% humidity with respect to water and 145% humidity with respect to ice, you need less moisture for ice than you do with clouds, with water clouds. So this is super saturated at 100% with respect to water, but the temperature is not cold enough. That's why it's red. Once you get to this one, you have a minus 45, and your actual was minus 40, actual predicted based on that Radiosonde input and the model that I'm using, which in this case is called the icon model. This changes between the models, by the way. So you've got all these models down here, and they'll give you a different.
And you know what we're going to do, by the way, folks, is I'm going to actually have, just to let you know, I will have Jeff I'll sit down with him. He's going to blow by blow by blow, or I'll do the tutorial and just really lay it out and put it into my Substack. So you guys can go to my Substack, and it's just like easy peasy to read instructions right there. Cause I know that when you hear this, your brain wants to explode. So I will dissect this out and make it really easy and tutorial instructions for you all on my Substack. I really want you guys to utilize this. I don't want there to be any question about the sincerity of what we're saying and our goals and the evidence we have and why we're taking the tactic that we're taking. So I can't encourage enough that you guys utilize this tool. I'm telling you, it's revolutionary, unbelievable.
Well, I'm getting into the weeds here, Reinette. I don't need to do that. You can just read this top part.
Yeah,
I don't need to explain to you how this all happens, what it's all based upon. It was based on survival of aircraft. Appleman Schmidt was a product that they used that had a graph before that was really hard to read, but now it's really, really simple to read by just going and looking at this top part. I can click anywhere. Let me click out on in middle of Utah.
right.
Okay, it's saying that they're predicted there as well. Let me go down to Phoenix. It changes a lot, long, possibly persistent from 28 to 30. But when you click inside of a cloud band, it gets better. And uh, based on that model with the location of the clouds, that numerical mathematical model predicts, it changes between them. So that's a different model that you can see the clouds forecast positions change. But when it boils down to it, if that if you go outside and you don't see a cirrus cloud, you don't have chance for a contrail. If you don't see a
And that
single
that
cirrus
wait, can I,
cloud,
and there's that then that is because the cirrus cloud is telling you there's enough moisture in the air, right? You have to have the right
yes,
ingredients. Moisture,
exactly.
freezing cold, barometric, and particulate matter. If you don't have all those four at a certain level, you don't get those persistent contrails. So if you don't see the cirrus clouds, that's telling you that it's probably too dry and you're just not going to see chemtrails at all. That's why I don't see a lot of them in the summertime.
And if you see a sea trail when there are no cirrus clouds in the sky, that's telling you, hmm,
There
that
might not, right.
that is possibly a chemtrail. That is maybe very likely a chemtrail. But you can have, okay, so think of it like this. A cloud, it forms where the conditions are right, where the temperature dew point spread is less than 5. If that temperature dew point spread is 5.6, it's a little too wide to form a cloud. You have an edge of a cloud. That temperature dew point spread, if the radiosonde passed through that clear spot, it would show a higher temperature dew point spread of 6. But to the west, it's moving in.
Right.
And a short while later, that cloud could have been where the radiosonde was if it had been 15 minutes earlier or later, rather. So it's based on that temperature dew point spread, whether there is a cloud. So the edge of a cloud says the conditions weren't quite right. But now fly an aircraft next to that cloud, right above it, right below it, right on the side of it. And what did you just do? You injected extra moisture from the burning of the kerosene, from the jet A or jet A1 or whatever the actual fuel is. You just added extra moisture, and now you might have gotten that temperature dew point spread to under 5, and now you see a contrail. So what I see when I look at the skies all the time, I'm looking for the cirrus clouds, and if you go to flight radar and see that one flight coming, you can identify it pretty easy if you have decent geospatial, relationships. You know where south actually is, and you look at that location, and you know that there's a cirrus cloud to the north of that one, and it's coming to the north. As it gets close to that cirrus cloud, all of a sudden you're going to see a contrail pop up because it's near one of those clouds and the conditions are right at the cloud.
So I thank you for this, Jeff. So I know again, you guys, it's going to take a few times to hear this over and over because it took me a while for it to really sink in. I get one little piece and then I'd be like, wait, what were you just saying? And I'd miss another piece. So it takes a while for it to sink in. And I want to make sure that, like someone saying, my brain's going to explode. So basically, they're saying is, I want to understand where and what to extent there are actual chemtrail operations with what and why. Well, I mean, first of all, there could be solar dimming geoengineering projects and programs. But as Jim Lee will tell you, a famous guy in the geoengineering world known as David Keith has said that he would only need like 12 airplanes out there that are equipped to spray aluminum to reflect the sun. But what he said recently is they don't need to do that. Why? Because commercial aviation is doing it for them. Now, can they take commercial aviation? Can they steer it? Could they use AI to ensure that planes are flying certain areas and dimming the sun here and there? Or, I mean, could they actually manipulate? Yeah, that is actually a possibility. That might actually be happening. So they could take something innocent and they could weaponize it. That's a whole other topic. But I want to say that that is something that we've dived deep into, and it's been proven to me. Now, I want to make sure that people understand that sometimes you'll see a plane flying and has that persistent contrail. We'll just call them sea trails for right now, sea trails. And you see a persistent, sea trail, and it'll stop and it'll come back and it'll stop and it'll come back. The reason why it looks like it's sputtering is because the atmospheric conditions, something is not just right. The air is not cold enough. It's not moist enough. There's not particulate matter enough. And that little section, and then it's just right again, and then it's not. But again, if you utilize this windy.com plugin, and I'm going to have Jeff show you how to get the plugin actually into your windy.com, because that's something we didn't hit. If you start to use that and get familiar with it, and this is really, really important. If you get familiar with it, you'll be able to look at the skies, look at this data and go, okay, I know what I'm seeing. I see the different layers. I see where it's clear here. There's long persistent contrails there, and there's shorter ones there that don't last very long. Now I understand why. It's because of the different layers of atmospheric conditions. I know this is a big nut to chew, guys. I'm telling you, I know this. And by the way, I won't get into right this very second, but I do want to talk about high bypass turbo engines. I did go on to Grok today. This is what we've been told, that the high bypass turbo engines do not create, chemtrails, these persistent contrails. I went on there and it actually said, absolutely, yes, it does. So that is information that is not correct. And I'll show you what I have here momentarily. I do have it saved, and I'll put it up on the screen for you all to read. But the fact that we're being told that these engines that the majority of planes are using does not produce sea trails is 100% inaccurate. Okay. Okay, I see. There's Strontium. Does organic seaweed detox strontium? I have no idea. Probably though. It's interesting. The commercial airlines don't do circles and X's and have the same crap they spray start spreading. The commercial airlines don't do circles and X's and have the same. They're releasing from the ground. You've seen. Well, when they're releasing from the ground, that is cloud seeding. To let you know, that is cloud seeding. It's generally through Cessnas with flares, and that's very common. Or they have these ground base where they shoot it up, and what they try to do is they try to get the cloud seed material into the updraft, and they usually do this like along the Sierra. It's basically, cloud seeding is very popular from the Colorado Rockies all the west to the Pacific, and they use that uplift of the air of the storms coming in. When the storms are coming in, the cessnas will come out. They do this iconic round and around kind of figure eight shape, and they'll release all the aluminum essentially, and they'll try to have that pick up into the storm so they can get more water out of it. And those are the ground-based cloud seeding programs to prove that there is no geoengineering warfare. Not at all, Jorge. Not at all. I'm just saying the day in, day out incessant streaks that you're seeing in the sky is coming from the commercial aviation. Now, I have to say this. Can that be weaponized? Can that be utilized in a nefarious way? Especially now with AI, I would think that's absolutely possible, that they can actually make sure that planes are flying one area, not another area, and they really maximize the solar radiation dimming. Absolutely, absolutely. But people, when they hear what we're saying, they think what we're saying is that geoengineering programs and clandestine programs aren't happening. Never ever would I say that. We have a long history of a proven history of polar opposite. Okay, so
Hey, Reinette,
yes, sir.
I would like to show another app here that shows a contrail simulator by a guy by the name of Mick West. So this is contrailscience.com, contrail simulations. And you can input the data from the radiosonde, and like say the plane speed here is 500 miles per hour, and say the wind speed is 79 miles per hour, and the wind is from the west, 286. Due west to be 270. You got 271 right there. So this is what the contrails are going to look like when you have the plane flying on two different jet routes that are crossing each other. So if you alter the wind speed, they're going to be farther apart or closer together based on that wind speed. So this is showing what they'll look like. And if you were doing circles, for instance, let me slow that wind speed down to a much slower speed, and they would be closer together because the speed is slower. But if I were doing circles with the same wind speed, if I was circling an area, and if I look at the satellite, I see straight line flights. I don't see this happening because that would stick out like a sore thumb. When I look at any of these places, go over to the East Coast, anywhere, zoom in, you can look at these and they are straight line, 500 mile per hour, straight line commercial flights. Go to here, go find a circle in there somewhere. It would stick out like a sore thumb if somebody was doing circles over a spot. So my thing here is that these cirrus cloud bands, you're going to see most of the contrails in the thinner areas, not in the red, because you can't in the red because it's too thick. They just get absorbed into the cloud. You will never see it from satellite if it's in the middle of the cloud, or in that thick area, when you have a several 1,000-foot thick cloud, you're not going to see a contrail from a jet aircraft. But in the thin areas at the edges, and that's usually at the southern edge, that's where you see them, where it's thinner and you get this very thin cloud. Blue lines show up with this particular product. You can't miss them. It's always at the leading edge, east and south. That's where you find them.
Okay, so I'm gonna take a breather here for a quick second. A lot of good questions, and thank you guys for asking, and thank you so much for having an open mind. I know, I mean, I had like an existential crisis when all this started coming down the pipe 2 years ago, and I was looking at it going, no, 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 this is not what I've been saying. This is not what I've been believing. This is not what I've been told. This is not what I've been told. Over and over and again, something else was repeated, and I believed something different until I went out of my way. Because again, you guys, I have to tell you something. I'm the one that's going to be going out there and leading this legal charge, this pursuit. I'm doing it pro se. So that means I'm even going into the court as the attorney. I have had to prove it to myself first because I'm not going to waste the last years of my life on chasing a dead end. So I had to prove it to myself. So I want you to please keep your minds open, which a lot of you are, and just understand our objective is to clean the skies out. I mean, not just make the stuff disappear and you don't see it, but actually clean the skies. And it's going to be a journey. So I want to answer some questions. And there's some things that Jim will have to get to. Coal fly ash, folks. Jim Lee will let you know that is not accurate. I used to think maybe they were spewing it out of, nozzles of commercial aviation. Unless you see those nozzles on the ends of the plane wings, it's not happening. And they can't put it into the jet fuel. They don't like to mess with the jet fuel because imagine putting ash from your fireplace into your car's gas tank. Your car would die. Planes would drop out of the sky. So they're not doing it there. This is something, again, that I believed was happening, and now it's been proven to me that that is not the case. Pulse clouds, this is a brilliant question, and I think it's really, really important that Jim Lee show you some images that can show you Pulse clouds have been going on for decades before there was NexRad, before there was Gwen towers, before there's anything like this. And he's going to show you these are natural occurrences and not what we think they are. And again, I mean, just a year ago, I thought they were something different. A year ago. That's how recent my understanding of what's been going on has really evolved. So we'll let Jim, Rita, hit upon that. I think it's a very, very good question. Starting to have second thoughts about Wilbur and Orville Wright. So I'm hearing we're getting poisoned via commercial aviation, cloud seeding, and some form of geoengineering. While all of it matters, it's the clandestine geoengineering, weather warfare, and possible international transhumanist tech poisoning I'm trying to get the handle on. Well, okay, can I ask how much non-commercial aviation, chemtrailing, or geoengineering Jeff sees going on? Jeff? Are you there, Jeff? Did you just get quiet?
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
So the question was again, please?
How much non-commercial aviation, chemtrailing, or geoengineering does Jeff see going on?
Okay, so anytime I've ever checked at my house, when I see a contrail, it always shows that it should be there via either Appleman or the MIC West persistent contrail tool. I didn't show you that one. It's as good as the Appleman, but the Appleman shows all the levels at once.
Right.
Um,
Okay. So,
they,
and I want, yes, sorry,
they
keep
can
going.
they can exist, of course, but I haven't found one, and I've been watching the skies, doing this assessment for 2 years plus right now in California.
Okay. So, and I want to talk about weather warfare. Laura's bringing up a really good point. Weather warfare was talked about Lyndon B. Johnson in the mid 1960s after JFK was murdered. That if we own the weather, we can own the world. NGOs were using weather manipulation to flood Vietnam and patents to go back into the 40s to control weather. Okay, there's a lot of patents, but the patents don't necessarily prove that these programs exist. And the Ho Chi Minh Trail that you're referring to in Vietnam was the first time we ever weaponized weather warfare, like weather manipulation. And what they did, it was through cloud seeding. They used cloud seeding to rain out the supply trail of the Viet Cong, and they were very successful in doing that. That's where they use cloud seeding. Now, cloud seeding also, Jim will tell you, I think it was back in the 60s, as a matter of fact. I think it was after Vietnam. Actually, I'm not exactly sure. Jim's gonna have to, I'm pretty sure it's the 60s though. Jim will tell you that they actually did the same thing where they cloud seeded the a hurricane coming in, and it ended up affecting the direction of the hurricane, and it went a different direction and it slammed into Georgia, causing millions and millions of dollars of damage. And that was like 50 years ago. So that is possible. And because of the weather warfare we conducted, and it was not NGOs, it was the military. When we conducted that, that is what ultimately spurred the NMOD, right? And that is the global treaty to not allow the weaponization of weather during the time of war. So that's during time of war, but they don't mention really during the time of peace. That's a little loophole. So you're very correct, Laura. And weather can be weaponized. It can be. And also, Jeff can speak to this. They did a deep dive when I was watching Hurricane Helene, and we're watching what's going on in Florida. They have a team on ClimateViewer, and they go in there and they analyze the flights, they analyze the Radiosonde data, they look at all of that. And sometimes it's kind of shocking that it's not the weather warfare we thought. They're looking for cloud seeding. While a lot of people say, well, people can, we can steer the storms, have the capacity to still the storms, steer them with NexRad and this and that. The amount of energy a storm has, the amount of energy is gigantic. And we don't have the capacity or the energy generation to steer storms, not with any technology that we're familiar with. And again, I've often said, well, is there technology we don't know about? That is always a possibility. But generally, when you see weaponization of weather in the past, it's been through cloud seeding, through cloud seeding. Okay. All righty. What's really going on? So getting okay. Oh, I'm cutting out. Thank you, Brandy. Sorry to hear that. Okay, so Jeff, can you quickly, Jeff, how does one find this contrail finder? So when they go on windy.com,
Yeah,
I want
I
to
can show
add
you.
the contrail finder, please. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. So install Windy plugins, and you'll see It's the top on mine, and
Well, how
it's
do they
already
find
installed.
it? Did they have to scroll down to find Contrail Finder?
Mine is on top, but maybe that's because it's there. But if it's not at the top, scroll down and find it. There's a whole bunch of them,
Okay.
and once you click on that guy, it'll take you in a minute. You'll have it, and then all you have to do is go back to your. You want to select high clouds.
So you
I
start with,
probably
so do you always select, you always start, in order to get back to that, the Contrail plugin, do you always start with high clouds? Is that what you click first?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, click on the X. You can see Contrail Finder over here. You have to have high clouds. It probably works with humidity too, but it doesn't work with every one of these. Like if I pick wind, I don't know if it would work with that, but I like picking high clouds because the high clouds are where they happen, up
Right.
above 20,000 feet, and the jets fly at 30 to 40,000 feet. So that's what matters. It's
Yeah.
the high clouds that matter. Therefore,
Right.
if you pick a spot that's like down in Alabama right now, are you still looking at my screen?
Yes.
If I pick down in Alabama, uh, let me click on Contrail Finder, pick down in Alabama where it's not showing any high clouds, minimal contrails may be seen.
I'll be darned.
And if
I
I click Texas, minimal contrails may be seen from 42 to 46. But if I click in a cloud band, like here up in Illinois, where the satellite showed they were there, 36 to 30,000 long, possibly persistent. And if you go and dig into the numbers, that gives you the check marks for the best zones from 30 to 36.
I'll be darned.
That's where the clouds are.
So I want to answer Robin McCall. She's saying I've never noticed trails behind the planes that are obviously commercial jets, while I see spray from these smaller planes on the same days with the same conditions. Okay, to be very clear, as you're seeing, if you scroll up at the detail analysis, if you can scroll up to the right side, what
Uh,
you're seeing right there is you're seeing right where you were. No, go back up again, Jeff. There we go. Thank you. Robin, so you see there at the very bottom, it starts with 30,000 feet, and then it goes to 31 and 32. Those are all the different levels of the atmosphere, of the troposphere. And it's showing you when it says long, possibly persistent, right? Sea trails, those are the contrails. Short contrails possible, minimal contrails may be seen higher up. That's where the conditions are just right for you to see those persistent contrails. So you might have a plane flying at 41,000 feet, and you're not going to see anything behind it. You might see a plane at 36,000 feet and you're going to see a long, persistent contrail going, well, wait a second, why is one spraying and why is one not? Because it's not about spraying, it's because one's at the level where the conditions are just right to see the persistent contrails, and the other one's at a level where the conditions may not be cold enough or not have enough particulate matter or whatever, where you're not going to see those sea trails. Boy, I hope this makes sense. It's complicated. You've been posting them to my post. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm hoping I'm answering all the questions. Now I want to get back to somebody had asked me, and Jorge, this is was because of the eruption of volcano. Yes, yes. In fact, okay, Jorge, yes. Jorge wants to know about Hunga Tonga. Jim, can you? I mean, sorry, Jim. Jeff, can you speak about that? This is really fascinating.
I can. I looked into the data big time when that happened, shortly after.
So, can you explain what that is? A lot of people don't know what that is.
Hunga Tonga was an undersea volcano. So the top of it was buried under 500 feet or 1,000 feet of water or whatever that was. It was a very deep top of an underwater volcano in the Pacific Ocean near, well, it would have been between South America and Australia. And I could probably look it up right now. Let's see.
What year is this?
2021, January of 21, I believe it was. So this thing was such a strong explosion that it actually reached through. You have the troposphere, the layers of the atmosphere are called the troposphere. That's where we live. That's where all the weather is. Then you have the stratosphere. That's where the ozone is. The temperature warms in the stratosphere. And then the next layer is the mesosphere. So this punched through this very, very stable stratosphere into the mesosphere. And to this day, there's still a lot of water vapor that's in the upper stratosphere that was not there prior to that event. So I recently did an analysis on that. I took all these Radiosonde soundings and I went and mapped out all the moisture that was there. And it's not the same as it used to be. The scientists that were studying this and all the papers estimated that the atmosphere of the entire planet gained 15% additional moisture.
We started getting more rain when
Yes.
so a couple of years ago before a couple of years ago we were in a really bad drought. Then all of a sudden we had a record amount of snow, and last year we had a great amount of rain, and even now we're having good rain. And from what you had taught me is because all of that moisture that got blown out of the ocean into the stratosphere is now starting to work its way out.
Yes.
That's amazing.
But it's decreasing now. It took a long time. It was the beginning of 2024 when the research papers that I saw showed that it started decreasing. And it's actually migrated to the upper stratosphere. The stuff down in the troposphere has largely rained out and is decreasing now. So that event is 3 years plus behind us now.
That's
And
bummer because we're going to get less rain. So is the moisture in atmosphere from the eruption contribute to less sunshine?
yes,
Yes, it would.
because more clouds equals less sunshine, correct?
Well, but also, wouldn't that also put more moisture in the troposphere and allowing for the conditions to be more perfect to have more of those persistent contrails? Would that affect it too?
Well, it depends on the day again. If
Right,
you
of
have,
course. Of course.
if it's daytime and that cloud mass floats over you during the day, it's going to reflect the sunlight. If it's night, it's going to keep it in.
Right. Right.
So it's a timing thing, and it's based on locality. If you look at that map right there where the clouds are going to be tomorrow, now let me just quickly show you one other one too. This is a product called VentuSky. I can't see it behind where is it?
Looking for it. Gosh, I'm not.
It should be at the top, but I got this chat thing in the way. No, I can't. How do you get that out
It's
of the
the
way?
tab right next to
To
windy.com.
the left, just right to the left.
VentuSky. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Um, if you look at this is a really good application to do a lot of stuff. But if you click on, it's called ventusky.com. If you click on clouds, high clouds, it's going to tell you where it thinks the clouds are going to be tomorrow. And these are the high clouds. So I was looking earlier because Nashville is right there. Tomorrow morning is going to be a contrail morning for Nashville, Tennessee. People in Tennessee are not going to be happy tomorrow morning.
Okay, and so basically what you're saying is when those movements of clouds are coming in, on their outskirts, they have more moisture. And what that is doing is that is making the conditions ripe for these persistent contrails.
Correct.
Okay. So, Daryl, so will your petition for rulemaking to the EPA be focused only on commercial aircraft flights? It'll be actually, it'll be focused on that as well as cloud seeding, as well as, I decided today when I heard about the Wigner effect, Wigner, and that has to do with taking commercial aviation and putting it into the stratosphere where it's getting just nailed by radiation and creating more aluminum nanoparticulate matter because it's literally wearing down the planes faster. We're going to add that as well. Now, to let you know, while we're doing that, and I want to make this very clear for everyone because they get frustrated, like we're going after this and not the clandestine programs. The clandestine programs for me are really hard to find, hard to reach, hard to convince the right people. We've got to do something about it by going after the commercial aviation and educating people what's going on about the commercial aviation, as well as, oh, by the way, there's these clandestine programs. We have a long history of it. It's still going on. And even if it's not going on, there are no laws in the books to prevent it. That's all that matters. There's nothing out there. In fact, we can be tested on all the time. That is actually what is on the books. So whether the programs are going on or not, we've got to put the law into the books where you can't use us like lab rats. So, and also I want to speak to what Michael was saying about a certain document with stratospheric aerosol injection. And also using, solar radiation management, solar dimming essentially. they can do that, and they want to do that to fight climate change. And by the way, I do not believe in climate change any longer. I was a big believer 10 years ago, was fighting hard for that. And what we've discovered, though, through this guy, David Keith, is that he said, look, we can go out there and we can do these solar dimming programs and projects. But to be very honest with you, your commercial aviation, because there is so much aluminum, there is so much reflective material coming out of the jet fuel day in, day out, that we don't really need to do the solar dimming because the commercial aviation industry is doing it for us, which is an insane statement. I mean, where people can contact you and or other way of following you. Yeah, if you guys want to email me, Reinette Senum at protonmail.com is the best thing. Here in Sonoma County, it's obvious that they spray chemtrails on the east side in the mornings to block the sun, and then in the afternoons they spray on the west side to prevent sunshine during sunsets. Oops, here we go. I'm feeling hopeless about growing a garden because we cannot get enough sunshine. Well, that's Terry, it's a serious issue. I mean, I don't think people realize it's a very serious issue. If we can't grow our food, we can't produce, electricity with solar, we can't get the photosynthesis, we can't get our vitamin D, our mental, emotional well-being. This is a huge, huge problem. And again, while we're at like 40 million flights right now, in 10 years, we'll be at 50 million flights or more. So you think it's bad now. So this is why we've got to get a handle on it. But let me say, I do want to say, Terry, I really would love for you to learn how to use the windy.com, the contrail finder. And in the morning, you get on there and you look at it and you see what it's saying. Now, I think, Jeff, you did say a bit of a trick with California is there's nobody releasing the Radiosonde weather balloons out in the Pacific Ocean. So it's a little hairier right along the coast. Is that correct?
That's true, but you're not a meteorologist, but if you look at the satellite, first of all, go to RAM, you're going to see what's coming out there. And tomorrow morning, it's going to be rainy in Sonoma. You're not going to see any contrails whatsoever. It's going to be absorbed into that red band right there. That's a cold front. And it's coming through California for the next day, and the stuff behind it is cold air. And we got several days of rain coming up here with maybe a couple breaks.
Right.
So they're lined up.
Right.
The next 4 of the 5 days, you're not going to see the sky.
Right, which is a bummer. Okay, so I want to say, Michael, thank you for your Google Drive. And again, I'm not saying the clandestine programs aren't happening, but me as a citizen, I will not have the capacity to find out about them. They consider it national security. That's why they're called clandestine. They're hidden. We have got to wake up and educate the White House, the heads of our different agencies, and say whether there are these programs or not. We've got to put it on the books that are no longer allowed. In the meantime, where we can fight is what we're focusing on right now. This, we can actually go out there and we can fight this. We actually have some legs with this. Whereas the clandestine programs, if somebody has the capacity and knows how to stop them, let me know. I'd be fascinated to find this out. So I do want to say, Jim Lee is here. Hello, Jim. And Jeff, before we get Jim going, do you have anything else you want to hit upon that we did not cover?
Oh, it would be nice to get into stratospheric aerosol injection above the troposphere. That's another time. It would be nice to look at cloud seeding. That would be another time as well, because I know how to find them and how to track them and know where they're going to be before they're there.
Well, I think that we should have you back because I have a feeling that this is such heavy information. I mean, I'm familiar with it, and even then my head is still spinning a bit, and I'm familiar with this information. So I can imagine when it's really brand new to somebody. And I think Jim's here, and I don't know, Jim, if you've been looking over the chat whatsoever. I've been trying to answer some questions. There has been some that I've left for you. Can you say hello, Jim? Do you have the capacity to do that?
Yeah, if I grab my microphone.
Hey, there you are. How you doing?
Um, a day late, a dollar short. Well, I'm an hour late.
That's okay. We knew you had
Yeah, we were getting into that chemtrail, meeting, and Monty Fritz was there, and the guy banned me because he didn't want me speaking.
right.
And so I did a whole lot of trolling. I can't help it. So I literally texted Monty Fritz. Like, I'm like, hey Monty, you might want to know about the people you're dealing with right now. And yeah, it's a terrible show going on right now.
Well, okay.
You're
Well,
not missing anything.
I'm glad you're here. People, we've had a lot of people on. This is very, very new information for them. You're new to them. The Radiosonde data and what Jeff is showing is brand new to them. And luckily, people are keeping pretty open-minded. And I started by saying to folks like, look at, and you can attest to this. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I had a certain belief system, and you really pointed out, like, this is what's going on, this is what's not going on. I've gone out, I have studied what you talked about, I've talked to other experts, I've had Jeff there also holding my hand, and I've really forced you guys to prove it to me. And I understand, much better what's going on. And my objective is just to get our skies blue. I have no skin in this game, and I have no reason to mislead people whatsoever. I won't waste my time doing that. And I know there's some people who do have some questions that I've not been able to answer. Like, for instance, they're talking about certain type of, contrails, chemtrails, we'll call them the sea trails, that have like little bubbles in the bottom, and they're different shapes, and they're different this, and they're different forms. How is that? How does that happen? That's one question. And another question is, like, you'll see how there's like a ripple effect, and it looks like it's a harp making these ripples. Can you explain that as well? Those are the two big.
Okay. So the wave clouds, the HARP clouds, um, I would say in 2012, I was still, looking into HARP and understanding all the technology and looking at what they call artificially generated gravitational waves, things like that. But in reality, like everything that I searched for to try to explain this didn't explain what Jeff could easily explain with meteorology, that Lee waves, yes, my name is Jim Lee, and Lee waves are gravitation. They're basically orographic lift and then wind coming up over a mountain, and then it undulates. It goes like this. So not only can that create the roll clouds, the wave clouds that we see. You may not believe what I'm saying, but I could literally go to my Telegram chat right now, and I have a bookmark from a photo from 1905 of wave clouds.
Can you show that? Because that really helps.
I can gladly bring it up real quick.
Uh,
Um, so what I like to do, and this is just my personal thing, it isn't for everybody, but because I just generally don't believe anything anybody says until I prove it to myself, um, I'm usually like skeptic to the end, and until I prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt to myself.
mhm.
My grandma always said there's two sides to every story, and somewhere in the middle lies the truth. And so with that being said, I just generally don't trust, and I have to like constantly keep going back on my firewall. I'm blocking this apparently. Oh, now it wants me to like log in using my phone. Isn't that wonderful? Security, you can never have too much of it. But yeah, the book was from 1905, and I'm looking at a photo of it, and then even further back, the first mention of mackerel skies and wave clouds comes from a book that's like from 1847.
Hmm.
So clearly there wasn't HARP back then. There weren't even high-powered microwave transmitters of any sort. Marconi had literally just invented the freaking radio. Um, if we have documented proof that these clouds existed well over 100 years ago, then why are we all focusing on the fact that these have to be man-made? See, I started from that premise. Let me see if I can get this thing to go. Link to desktop, take a photo. Boom. There we go. It's all linked up. Let me go to my saved messages and go to cloud. Wave clouds.
And I see Jay Brooks had asked at 7:01 while you're doing this about the Swiss scientists these weird webs coming out of the sky. Yes, absolutely. And to be clear, though, that's not geoengineering. That's some kind of weaponization. That's some kind of other spraying, but it doesn't alter the weather. But there was something going on, and we're trying to get to the bottom of that. And that was, yeah, highly.
Yeah. So and I talked to Christian about this. Ed and I both agreed because, I'm very familiar with electrospinning. A friend of mine, Pete Ramon, had taught me about this back in like
Can I
2014.
just say real fast, electrospinning is where there's a liquid in the plane. They use a negative positive charge from the planet, and there's like a nozzle, and the liquid turns into like a long thread, correct? Like a web. Is that correct?
It's a way of creating polymers.
Polymers.
But very specifically, electro sprays are almost exclusively used in aerial pesticide spraying. So whenever you see like a crop duster or any of those types of things, the actual spray nozzle itself is called an electro spray. It uses electricity and sprays, spray nozzles connected to vats, which then eject the chemicals. So the most likely scenario for, what the fibers that people are finding are more than likely pesticides and herbicides. And that's just, you can't really argue with it. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
So this is from a book, which, as you can see right here, let me go back down. Where'd it go? Wave clouds 119. And you can see right here, this is taken crested alto wave clouds, alto waves, alto stratus, undatus. Jeff, help me out here. But this book is literally,
Undulatus.
yeah, it doesn't say undulatus. Undulatus. That's what I thought it would say, but this is Cloud Studies by Arthur W. Clayton. And this is from 1905 in London. And this is on the Gutenberg Library. So, literally, here's the cover of the book written in 1905. And yeah, they're talking about wave clouds even back then with an actual photo from that time. So when you start to see things like this, you have to go, okay, well, this isn't a new phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Again, it's shocking because we have not been given that perspective. And I think it's really, really important, speaking of atmospheric conditions, that we pull away at the 30,000 foot level and start looking at these things, not just in the immediate time, but back in time, right? And see like, oh, these clouds were here before there was HARP. Because again, a year ago, I thought it was HARP.
And I put this one up as well because I got in an argument with somebody on X, which is typical. That's just what I do. And they were saying, no, propeller planes don't create contrails. And I'm like, but what about B-17 flying fortresses, World War II? And they're like, that didn't happen. I'm like, really? How about that photo? How about that photo? These are the bombers that were in World War II going over Germany. And I'm pretty darn sure that the bombers that got shot out of the sky with flak, cannons didn't want big white stripes coming from behind them. Furthermore, they weren't even jet engines, they were propeller driven. So, how is it possible that in 1942, and don't take my word for it on these photos, you can watch all kinds of, uh, like documentary films and watch the bombers coming over with big white streams coming out the back of them. And you cannot argue that that was chemtrails 1942.
Okay, I'm a bit lost. So if those are propellers, then how are those trails being created?
Well, because first off, there are two types of contrails. There's aerodynamic contrails and then there's exhaust-based contrails, both of which turn into cirrus clouds. This is the part that most people just get twisted. Whether you call it a chemtrail or a contrail, once it fans out, once it lingers and then turns into a cloud that blocks out the sun, it's neither a chemtrail nor a contrail. It's a cirrus cloud. So these are just long-lived contrails. All right. None of these photos show them actually covering the entire sky and blocking out the sun. But the propeller planes, just the propellers themselves, start what's called an aerodynamic contrail. This is what you see when you see like a fighter plane. You know, if you go watch any video like a F-16 or a F-22 Raptor pulling high G's, and as it's, you know, banking really quickly, you'll see little clouds, little streams coming off the wings. That's called an aerodynamic contrail. Same is true with the propellers back then. And then you add to the fact that they were using what's called avgas. It wasn't kerosene, it was gasoline. Therefore, they had to add something to it called tetraethyl lead. It's an anti-knock agent. Lead is an excellent cloud seed. So the fact that there was lead in the fuel in combination with the high altitude, how cold it was, what Jeff went over earlier, I'm sure, about what's called the Schmidt-Appelman criterion.
Yeah.
You understand that at that altitude, at that temperature, with that amount of humidity, those planes were making clouds. And clearly you can see planes in this picture that are lower altitude. They're not up as high as these, and they're not making clouds.
That's a great example right there. Because again, 2 years ago, I'd be like, oh, look, they're spraying, they're not. That's what I'd be saying, of course.
I was there, and I have no shame about this. 15, 20 years ago, I was a chemtard. I was a chembicil. I believed everything was spraying. And the more that I, you know, as opposed to just, you know, being in an echo chamber, I would take everything that I was doing and I would try to find people who disagreed with me. And I'm like, all right, well, you know, prove me wrong. And guess what? A whole lot of people did multiple times. And then I started, you know, people would say, oh, well, they're all military flights. No, I went and I bought a Nikon P900. So I had an 85 times optical zoom, and I'd go out and I'd see the planes. And I'm like, I can read the tail on the plane. That thing says Southwest Airlines. That one said Delta Airlines. That one said United. It's still making chemtrails. Now I'm confused because I was told that they were all military planes. They're not. And then I graduated a little more and more to where I finally got to understanding when contrails form, what ice supersaturated regions are, the entire history of it. And if you really want to get ugly with this, you go back in time, and on the timeline here, you can see contrail complaints. Let's see. Go all the way down here.
While you're looking at this, there's somebody asking, please explain the circles, the X's, and the squares. You have not even made an effort to explain this. Well, X's are just planes crossing paths. Circles, sometimes planes do fly in circles. And again, if the atmosphere is just right, you'll see those trails. And squares, I'm not familiar with the squares.
So all of the flights are routed in the United States. If you go to I'll just go to ADSB Exchange. So if you go to ADSB Exchange right now, I know I got an ad blocker, get over it.
That's
you
all
can't,
that's all the
yeah,
planes in the air right now.
right now,
Just right
live
now.
as we're talking. So when you do this and you look at that, and then you look at this one, and it's going this way, and this one's going pretty much the same way, you can just click on them and you can see which way they were coming from, this one literally just took off from there, but not a great example. So all of these are flying this way. You have to remember that the sky is a river. So all of the air is blowing. If this is making a trail, it's going to go this way. And then the next plane's going to come along and it's flying pretty much the same direction. So now you've got two lines in a grid, together. And these planes are flying across them. So unless lines are parallel, they're eventually going to intersect. That's like basic math, eventually, like right now, that plane plus that plane is making an X. You know what I mean? That makes sense. So I don't think people really understand how many freaking planes there are. And why there are grids? Because there are skyways. Just like we have interstates and we have highways, we have skyways. Don't believe me? Take a look right here. That is a major skyway from the tip of Florida to California and LA.
And again, you guys, this is just right now. I mean, this goes on into the evening. This is and over the next 10 years, you said about what, 40 million flights a year, Jim, is that correct? Over the US?
Yeah.
How
And
much how much do you think it'll increase in 10 years? Are we gonna be at 50 million, 55 million? What do you
no, we'll be way over that. In 2004, we were at 22 million. In 2019, we were at 43 million. That's a doubling in 15 years.
Yeah, that's just see you guys. So when people say that this is not important, this is not it, and again, I'm not saying that the clandestine programs aren't important, but they're harder for us to grapple and to get control of and to fight. So when I started to realize the enormity of what Jim has been really trying over and over and over again to hammer away, and how this is on an exponential curve as far as the amount of flights. And then we saw the rainwater samples reflect what's in the jet fuel. I was like, holy cow, I got to back away for a moment and reconsider, like what you guys are doing right now, reconsider everything that I believe. And
And this really accentuates it. So, this is 1948, Mystery of the Point Augusta Sky Trails. Okay. This is 1951, Plain Vapor Trails. They weren't always called contrails. That's a newer formulation of it. The one that really hits you is this one. December 1958, Jet Trails Dim Sun, Palm Springs gripes. Quote, the contrails are not disappearing, but are breaking down into a haze and creating a cloud-like appearance in the sky. With the unlimited expanse of barren, uninhabited land in the West, does such activity have to be centered over a resort area, which is offering the visitor cloudless skies and unlimited sunshine? The Air Force so far is flabbergasted. This is December 1958, and in Palm Springs, California, vapor trails, contrails, were blocking out the sun. And the Air Force so far is flabbergasted. 1 month later, this is the same article in a different newspaper. So I like to try to get multiple sources for it. Exact same quote right here. Air Force so far is flabbergasted. How flabbergasted were they? Air Force gives village two choices: live with the trails or move.
yeah,
January 31st, 1958.
yeah. And let me tell you, I looked in 1963, and from what I read, and you might have, I would trust your information right now more than mine. I did a cursory search. 1963, I think there's like 300,000 flights a year in the United States. 300,000 flights. Does that sound like?
And this one really makes me laugh. September 18th, 1960. US jet planes will lose their vapor trails soon. Like they're
Well,
gonna
and I
actually
want to say, did you see also, where did it go? This report just came out. Oh gosh, did I just lose it? I did, didn't I? Where's that report that just came out about the? I'll find it here in a second. About the aviation trails. It just came out yesterday. Let's see. I put it on the Climate Viewer here.
are you talking about the
Yeah. So this is basically this is it says, it talks about
the
spraying, which you guys hate. FAA, NASA, NOAA admit jets spray. It should be like spewed.
yeah.
Chemtrails linger in the sky after weather.
I
Trails last for hours to days and can span several hundred kilometers. And so this is the Contrail Research Roadmap. And they're literally talking about exactly what we're talking about.
so I talked to John Fleetwood earlier and I trolled him a little bit.
Oh, who's
Um,
John Fleetwood? Who's he?
he's the one that wrote the article that you're
Oh,
currently reading.
oh, Vigilant News. Okay. Let me see. Got
Um, so he put it on there. And the thing is, I showed this in my video that I made on March 3rd. And then he wrote it on johnfleetwood.com, which is johnfleetwood.substack.com. And then he ended up showing up in an X space that I was in earlier, and we kind of hit it off. Like, hey, I was kind of, breaking your, what. But I showed this in a video because people don't believe this is even real.
Right.
And it goes through all of the things that they're trying to do to deal with the contrails. Because at the end of the day, um, when you look at this graphic right here, um, you know, I tweeted to him. I'll even show it real quick because it's kind of funny. I tweeted to him that, hey, are you trolling me or are you just screwing around? Um, and of course he was like, excuse me? Where'd he go? This was earlier today. It must be in replies. But
So,
yeah, he basically covered it on his on his Substack.
so while you're looking for this, one of the questions is somebody just asked, so is the goal to ban commercial aircraft or to limit it? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and people always go to the, well, are you trying to say that you're down with the here it is. Um I basically said to him, I just read your article and this is it right here. Oh, come on. It had a gigabyte per second. What the heck? FAA, NASA, NOAA admit jets spray chemtrail chemicals that linger in sky, alter weather. Trails last for hours to days, can span several hundred kilometers. I'll put it in the chat. Shout out John Fleetwood. And we really opened a discussion today because I ended up talking to him for almost an hour in an egg space as a result of this. And I said, I mentioned this in a video earlier. And specifically it was anyway, it's a lengthy right here. So you can see that is from the report right there. Um, and I was just going, giving people a general overview of what Lee et al. 2021 was. But in the picture, in the video that I'm showing, I'm actually showing the entire thing. And that's in the article that I wrote, for anybody who wants to actually read it and or watch the video.
Okay,
Um,
can I just say, you guys, can you put that link of this, you guys, this Substack right here is the most important Substack you can read regarding geoengineering and commercial aviation, what it is and what it is not. And he goes into, Jim did, and was an EPA hearing years ago. He goes into the details. He has links. He has the evidence. He has the sources, additional videos. But I have been setting this Substack. They just did this last week all over the place, everywhere. And for the folks who are talking about legislation, please, please, please do yourselves a favor, because I know this is like mind-bending information. Go to that link, check it out, bookmark it, study it, because this is specifically to help people write the legislation and how to address it.
and I'm going to add this infographic, because this infographic I sent it to Dominic. Dominic made it in 45 minutes right before I did the video. So it's not in the article yet. I'm going to add it um, tomorrow. But the thing is that people don't understand the difference between stratospheric aerosol injection geoengineering and ground-based
Right.
cloud seeding flares, like where this all occurs. Geoengineering never was intended for 30 to 45,000 feet where planes are flying. Never have I ever read a paper that said that. Now, there have been many different geoengineering peer-reviewed papers on altering jet fuel to increase sulfur to put it in the stratosphere. But what David Keith and Ken Caldera, Bill Gates, when they're talking about geoengineering, they're talking 70 to 90,000 feet. No
And
plane on the planet can fly that high.
and
So they
and
have
also
to they have to invent one.
and also you're talking about the stratosphere. So the troposphere, when you have the sea trails and all the jet exhaust in there, that gets washed out when it rains, right? That's when it comes out of the sky. But in the stratosphere, when you have the Davos group and the jet set flying up there, as you said, that stuff hangs up there there's no weather up there, there's no rain up there. So that's up there for 2 years and it's punching holes in the ozone layer.
And if you literally just go to this, it's color coded, and you can basically see that every single private jet, if you go to globe.aesbexchange.com and you look at the private jets, it says current height 45,000 feet.
And those are the light pink ones, right? The ones that are the light,
Every one of them that's
the
pink.
higher they are. And the darker
Yeah.
are the ones in the troposphere.
Yes. So that's how you can basically just, zoom in, find yourself some private jets, and all of the private jets, which have they're a very hot pink. If I click on this one, again, 43,000 feet. So these are in the stratosphere.
That's crazy.
So
Now,
there isn't a private jet. You're not going to find a private jet flying below. There's another private jet. It's at 41,000 feet. So they're always above the tropopause. This one's currently at 43,000 feet, and the list goes on. So all the private jets, that one's 45,250.
and they're above the troposphere in the stratosphere. I mean, yeah, stratosphere, because they're not dealing with weather, right? They're not dealing with wind. They're not, it's like it's an
There's no turbulence.
There's no turbulence. It's just better, mileage, better fuel. And that's where you said the commercial aviation's now trying to bring their planes up higher for that very reason. But then radiation, I want you to get into the Wigner effect. But before we do that, so that's some of the changes we're seeing. Now, I've had some people ask some questions like, well, what do we do? Can we take more of that nanoparticulate matter, the soot, out of the fuel? I know you're not a fan of biofuels, and neither am I. I mean, people have been saying you're trying to push biofuels, but you've been saying, that can make matters worse. You don't even know what you're getting. And I agree with you 100%. So that's not the answer. So
Well,
how
to
do we,
be fair, Mellow Scat was, just trying to throw poo at the wall and hope it sticks. But in reality, since 2013 and at the EPA hearing where I testified to the EPA, I said to them very clearly, biofuels are not a solution for
Yeah.
climate change or for contrail control, despite their claims that they are. And it's in the article as well. You can actually see where they say jet biofuel enlisted for contrail control. This article is from 2013.
Yeah, that's insane.
So this has been in the works for a very long time. The other term for jet biofuel is sustainable aviation fuels.
Yeah.
And you can see right here, I linked to an article that I wrote in 2014 that goes through all of the different types of biofuels, where they would like to grow algae, jatropha, camelina, other different types of biofuels, and some of the additives that they use. But when you start looking at what they call feedstocks, that's when it gets
Right.
really weird, because these are the types of things, and these are the agencies involved in bringing together. This is the Farm to Fly program from 2013. I mean, it's all the usual suspects: USDA, Department of Commerce, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, EPA, FAA, NASA, National Science Foundation, all in on sustainable aviation fuel or biofuels.
So,
So
okay, so we know the biofuels are not the answer. One of the things you can do to reduce the condensation trails is use perhaps AI, just like you have this plugin on windy.com, have the planes fly where they're less likely to produce the persistent contrails. That does not, of course, address the heavy metals and the soot and the sulfur. So what do we do about that?
So that's why Bill Gates and company have been pushing the idea of what's called contrail avoidance.
Yeah.
And this goes back to what Jeff was talking about earlier. If you know where ice supersaturated regions are, if you know where contrail forming regions are in the sky, then you can fly around them and you can create cooling contrails, not warming contrails, because contrails, when they make cirrus clouds that block out the sun, yes, some of that is reflected to space, but more of it's actually trapped at the surface. So the heat that makes it through can't escape back to space, which leads to a net warming. So, in fact, despite claims by Dane Wigington that this is all about cooling the planet, it turns out that cirrus clouds created by aviation are 5,000 times greater at warming the planet than all of the CO2 that has ever been emitted by aviation since the start of aviation.
That is
So,
staggering commentary.
and that's from Olivier Boucher, head of the aviation of the IPCC's report on aerosol cloud interaction and what's called albedo. So I quoted him in my EPA speech, and they basically show right here they have a contrail map. So when you look at Bill Gates' contrail map, they lay it out very clearly. Cooling contrails, these contrails have a net cooling effect by reflecting incoming solar radiation. Warming contrails, these contrails have a net warming effect by trapping outgoing thermal radiation.
Can you
So,
share that link with everyone here?
sure.
Because that's a great website right there for people to get familiar with. Contrails.org.
Yep.
Contrails, you guys grab that link for those of
And,
you.
and if you go look into it, Bill Gates, he's the one behind this breakthrough energy. Bill Gates is the owner of it.
Yeah.
And you can actually go look at their, source code on GitHub, and it's Ulrich Schumann's contrail cirrus prediction tool. So like all of this lines up. It's Ken Caldera, geoengineer, Ulrich Schumann, he said less warming, more cooling contrails, predictable for operational planning. So like the real problem is that while everybody's saying contrails aren't real, the scientists are saying, um, well, how about we take advantage of, contrails? How about we, change the chemicals in the jet fuel to make them cool the planet? David Keith even said that when Mexico banned geoengineering because of what Make Sunsets was doing, that there's no way to enforce that because planes emit sulfur into the stratosphere. Remember, we just showed you all the private jets and all the planes flying above the tropopause. They're flying in the stratosphere. So all the sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid they're putting up there not only creates acid rain, something you don't hear about anymore. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 48 years old. When I was growing up, that's all I ever heard about in middle school and high school was acid rain. Acid rain's going to kill everything. Now it's global warming. Um, but that sulfur is what they want to do. They want to mimic what volcanoes do naturally by putting sulfur into the stratosphere because sulfur has a cooling effect. Newsflash, sulfur kills people.
Yeah.
That's why they banned sulfur pretty much in tractor trailers. They have ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, which is limited to 0.15 parts per million of sulfur in the diesel fuel. In a plane, the FAA and the Clean Air Act, EPA, the limit on jet fuel is 3,000 parts per million of sulfur.
Wow.
So they want to block it on the ground, but they don't want to block it in the sky because they know that sulfur coming out of jet exhaust cools the planet. So even though geoengineering is illegal, they really want to cool the planet. And when they banned bunker fuel, which is heavy fuel oil in international shipping, that dramatically cut down the amount of sulfur that was coming out of ships in the ocean. And they got big mad about that. In fact, and I got a picture of it right here, you can see this was MIT Technology Review. We're about to kill a massive accidental experiment in reducing global warming. And they were referring to the International Maritime Organization's 2020 ban on bunker fuel. Now, they haven't banned high sulfur jet fuel. airplane contrails may be creating accidental geoengineering. And that came from Chuck Long at Earth Systems Research Lab, who noticed that basically he called it clear sky daylight whitening.
Right. And that
So
is when you guys look out over the horizon, like you look up, the sky looks fairly blue. You look out over the horizon and it's got that hazy look, which is so common these days. That's what they want. That's what they want to become the norm.
I want to address the comment in chat. How has Dane from Geoengineering Watch got it so wrong then? None of his content has ever acknowledged persistent contrails. Hold on to your seatbelt because I'm going to show you something you're not going to see anywhere else. Okay? This is going to be a little bit shocking, but I promise it's worth it. How do I get out of this? Uh, now I'm failing. There we go. All right, so it's in the ClimateViewer chat under research papers. Bro, I can't even navigate my own crap today. I'm having that day. All right, so just search here and I'll go to Dane.
We're not working to abolish planes.
No,
Not at all. We're not going to be abolishing planes. That's not going to happen. But we still have to get to like, what are the answers? And we do have certain answers and solutions, but we do have to get to that. We can't leave people hanging.
of course not. But the answers really are, if you don't like this, we're going to have to deal with this at the federal level. I mean, the reason why I testified at the EPA in 2015 is because the Clean Air Act really is the only way to deal with this problem. And that's the way federal law works, unfortunately. Why can I not go to the other chat?
So while you're looking, someone said, do you not believe that there's like a transhumanistic agenda and that there's global chemtrailing operations?
I believe transhumanism is definitely a global agenda. It's part of technocracy. Anybody that doesn't know that clearly hasn't been paying attention. I fully agree with you with that. The problem I have is with people who make claims that I know that nanobots are coming out of planes. Prove it. I know that Morgellons are coming out of planes. Prove it, Clifford Carnicom. You cannot. You have no way to prove that that came from a plane. So, J. Marvin Herndon, chemtrails are coal fly ash. Prove it. You cannot. I know every single one of these people. I've talked to them on the phone. I know their, home addresses. They've all come to me for help and then turned right around and started telling, the same story that they've always told. And that's the main problem that I have with, this whole narrative that people are building. Correlation does not equal causation. Just because you think that the thing that you're finding came from a plane, prove it in a court of law. And I've been at this for 20 years. You cannot, just because you find something in your rain, prove that it came from a plane. And even all of the people who have been up in those planes and went behind the planes and sniffed their chemtrails, they've confirmed that aluminum, barium, vanadium, molybdenum, copper, nickel, lead, all of the chemicals are present in the jet exhaust. We know this. They've tested the clouds that they make. They found that 75% of cloud seeds in cirrus clouds were man-made metals. Where did those metals come from? They came from jet exhaust. How did that happen? Because jet exhaust, black carbon covered in graphene filled with metals, turns out it's a great cloud seed. So this has always been going on. It's only gotten worse because now we have 43 plus million flights per year. In 2007, we invented social media. The Nokia phone came out around that time also. So is it any surprise that this problem that we all say, I was a Boy Scout in 89 through like 94. I was out camping and hiking, and I remember blue skies just like you do.
Yep.
But it got exponentially worse because it has literally been doubling and tripling year over year the number of flights. Add to that the fact that everybody's got a freaking phone in their hand now and they got an internet, social media to share it on. It's become global awareness. Whereas before we were all just happy and, hanging out in the woods.
Oh, Todd's asking where's the information that's going to blow their minds.
I'm trying, I don't know why, but I can't. I'm clicking on ClimateViewer chat and I'm trying to go to the research topic. And for some reason on this stupid desktop app, I can't switch from to the other chat. And I don't understand why.
Well, I think what you were going to, I'm assuming this is what you're going to point out, what you've pointed out to me and shown me is that early on, and again, I don't like talking about people, but because it was a specific question, Dane was speaking to persistent contrails at one time, and then that changed over time. Is that what you're pointing out?
Yeah, I found it.
Okay.
Here you go. All right. So this is from Dane Wigington, and I'm going to share it on the screen right now. This is his paper, not mine. I didn't write it. He wrote it. This is Dane in 2007. Diminished solar charge capacities due to the persistent jet contrails. August 18, 2007, by Dane Wigington, Shasta County, California. DaneW@Shasta.com. I relocated to Northern California because I'm rich and I wanted to live on a mountaintop with my solar panels, but the persistent contrails started blocking them. And even though I was featured on the cover of a sustainable energy magazine, I was losing my solar power due to persistent jet contrails. So riddle me this. When did it change?
Yeah.
When did he change from this narrative to, planes can't make contrails? I mean, that's really where we're at now. You have him saying that high bypass turbofans, it's right there. High bypass turbofan jet engines are in the contrail lie. So in 2017, he adopted Russ Tanner from Chemtrail Global Skywatch's version of things that basically these engines cannot create high bypass turbofans can't create contrails. And this is probably the biggest deception going on today, because basically what we have now is a whole lot of people who are trying to go and, pass legislation in their local states, and they're of the mindset that contrails don't exist. Why? Because Dane said so. Why? Because Russ Tanner told him so. But in 2007, Dane was saying, I'm losing my solar panel, uptake because of persistent jet contrails.
And
That's an original document from his website, and I pulled it off archive.org.
Something changed along the way. I don't know. It would just only be a pure guess. But I have to say, I have a homework assignment for everyone. One of the big things, and I keep getting pounded over this, people keep saying to me, but Reinette, the high bypass turbofan engines do not make persistent contrails. They don't do that anymore. So it's impossible. I suggest you go onto chat, you go onto Grok, you go into one of the AIs and you ask, do high bypass turbofan engines, right, contrails, do they produce persistent contrails if the atmospheric conditions are right? And you're going to get the answer basically from chat, hell yes.
And if anybody would like to download that document from Dane, here is a link directly to my Telegram chat. Feel free to share it, because that's his words, not mine. I went into Dane's website, and he has a documents folder on geoengineeringwatch.org. And it is nothing but over 300 documents on contrail formation. He took the Air Force's contrail fact sheet, he cut out a picture from it, and then put it on his website and said, but my chemtrails. And it was literally a wake vortex test done at Langley Research Center. And you can see on his website, here's the document he took the picture from, and he keeps reusing it. He also tells everybody that NOAA's under a federal gag order, and that's why they can't talk about the secret spraying, which is a provable lie. And we've pointed this out to him, but he continues to tell this lie.
I have to say,
So,
I've had a legal team, attorneys, high-end attorneys out of Houston, Texas. We found out this gag order. We were looking for the original docket because my legal team was going to pursue a First Amendment right violation against the U.S. government for gagging meteorologists and weather reporters not to talk about geoengineering projects they might see. We found out that original document does not exist. There was never a gag order. It had to do with an internal negotiations with the union. And when we told him that this is the truth, the gag order does not exist, he has still continued perpetuating that story, still to this day.
yeah, and I'm just replying to somebody in chat. Maybe it's because, you just like you change your mind on things like global warming. Dane actually believes that the IPCC is lying and that we are at 5 degrees Celsius of warming.
No.
You can read it on his page, on his webpage. Now, I want to remind everybody this. I say this at the end of every single video I meet, and I mean it. Attack ideas, not people. This is not about Dane. This is about his ideas.
Right.
This is about the things he's saying and the effect it's having on all the activists who are trying to find the truth. So if you come from a place where you're saying that global warming is real, geoengineering is all military planes, contrails don't exist, it's a secret government program, NOAA's not allowed to talk about it because of a gag order, and then you put that into a documentary, guess what? 25 million views later, there is an entire generation of people who have been misinformed. And as an activist who has testified, I took a train to the EPA in Washington because damn flying there to bitch about planes. As an activist that wants to see clear skies, I'll be damned if some dude's going to run around like he's hot shit telling everybody that contrails don't exist. Everything you're seeing is a lie. Don't believe the contrail lie. Meanwhile, he's readily mocked in scientific journals, and I've been cited in over 200 peer-reviewed scientific journals, even by David Keith and Ken Caldera, who hate my guts, and I hate their guts. At least they can admit that my solution, the Environmental Modification Accountability Act, is necessary. So this isn't about egos. This isn't about, Dane. I don't think that Dane's a shill. A lot of people have called me they've called me everything in the book. You're free to do that. I will violently defend your right to be offensive. Okay. We all have freedom of speech.
So what I want to get to is also, I do wonder, you guys, if this hyper-focusedness of the clandestine programs that we're looking so far out there, looking for that needle in the haystack, that we're not looking at what's right smack dab in front of us, which is an ever-expanding commercial aviation industry that is spewing over us day in, day out, every single day, all the time. And I feel like what's happened is that we are looking for that ultimate boogeyman while not dealing with this ever-growing, industry that is definitely, I think you called it's aviation-induced mortality. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to say though, before we go any further, because I know people start leaving right now. What are the solutions, Jim? And we can get into more of the weeds, but like, what are the solutions?
So right now they're really in a conundrum. The conundrum is that they don't have any solutions. And if you look at the process from inventing an aircraft, framework and engine and all of that, to going through all the inspections, to actually making it flight worthy, and then getting passengers on board, we're talking 10 to 20 years before they actually come up with a solution.
Right.
Which to me, as a person who studied propaganda and psychological operations, what seems logical is this. The chemtrail conspiracy is great for the airline industry.
Yep.
Why? You're busy fighting a straw man,
Yep.
and you're not focused on the airlines that are poisoning you with 100 quadrillion, that's 100 with 15 zeros of nanoparticles per second while they're flying.
Yep.
And that's one plane per second. You do that times 150,000 flights per day times 43 million per year, and all of the metals that are raining down on us, nobody's even looking into it. Because why? My chemtrails. Because
Yeah.
you know this is all sprays and pumps and pipes. Even Monty Fritz, I was texting him earlier about this because somebody just brought up this Surge guy, Serge L. Brown, who's on X. He was supposed to have a chemtrail space tonight, and J. Marvin Herndon was supposed to be there. So I was going to go there to kick his ass, but personally, the basically the trolls of the internet all got to Serge and said, "You don't need to have Jim in here." And so anyway, that all fell apart, and I'm texting Monty, warning him about Surge. And at the end of the day, all this stuff is so personal. You would not believe the amount of drama that me and Reinette and people like us go through on a daily basis from all these egomaniacs that, are in this area. So I'll just say this, and I'll kind of land my plane with this. Right now, there's a whole bunch of COVID kids, and the COVID kids got really famous off of profiting off the fear associated with an attention on mRNA and mandates and all of that stuff. So they started blogs, they started videos, they started going to their town legislatures to raise hell about that. Well, guess what? Nobody gives a damn about COVID anymore. So their traffic is down. They're not making the money they were making before. The donations are drying up. So what happened? All the COVID kids came for my chemtrails. And now I'm literally literally in just the last 3 months, I know of 15 ex-COVID kids who are now trying to start, legislation or, Clear Skies Initiative, like the person mentioned earlier, that Surge guy. I'm starting, I'm going to stop this myself. The problem is, activism without education is basically neutered activism. That's why we're seeing laws like, Monty passed in Tennessee banning geoengineering. But guess what? My chemtrails are still in the sky. Why? Because Jeff and I can predict exactly when they're going to show up. Why? Because science. I'm trying not to curse a lot, but I'm like, science, bitches. Like, literally, you can predict this stuff. If Jeff can predict it and I can predict it, that's why meteorologists are laughing at us as activists at this point. That's not a good place to be.
So
People really need to up their game.
So this is the thing, you guys, and I know there's folks here who want to work in legislation. I want you to be effective. And what has happened, and I've seen it myself because I was in the COVID fight. I was in the geoengineering fight beforehand, did not understand it. Now I understand it. I returned to it after COVID cooled down. And we have a lot of people who are looking at the sky saying, I don't like what I see, which is great. That's fantastic. But they haven't been clearly educated by the people who are actually bringing the science forward.
Is Russ Tanner, is that actually Russ Tanner? Like, I see Russ Tanner's name right there in chat. Russ, is that actually you? Because if it is, come off the mic. I would love to hear you tell everybody about when I debated you and Dane Wigington in 2014 and how Dane threatened to sue the guy if he ever released the tape.
So my point is that
he's right there. It's Russ Tanner right there in the chat.
I'm not seeing Russ Tanner at all in the chat. Why am I not seeing him?
I'm seeing his screen and the name says Russ Tanner.
That's
like,
crazy. It's blank for me. So, okay,
it's a small world after all.
So folks,
sorry.
The ones who want to do the legislation, a couple different things. And again, we have to talk about NMOD. We got to end this with a solution. One of the things I don't like is the fear mongering. People, we are actually addicted to fear. We are literally addicted to fear. And there are people who are going out there and they're sharing fear to get the clicks, to get the subscriptions, to get the money. And it's a great disservice. And when I die, I want to die, and the last thing I see is a blue sky before I close.
Damn right.
That's what I want. And there's no ego in this. I have been very humbled over the last 2 years. And all I want is that those who are working on the legislation to go to Jim's Substack that he was showing that we have there, saying, if you want to pass legislation that's going to stick, that's going to have an impact, this is what you've got to understand. This is what you've got to do. And it is not it's a nationwide, it's a federal issue, it's a global issue. And we have to attack it that way. But first, we have to educate the masses, and we have to uneducate them because they have a story and a narrative in their mind, like I did. And I had to literally like unglue my brain to absorb this new information. And there's like, holy cow, I've been coming at it completely wrong. How did that happen? I don't know. But more than likely, the fossil fuel and aviation industry have made sure that, as he said, we don't talk about it. So please know that if you're working on legislation, go to that website. You can come speak to me, speak to Jim. Now, I want to talk about NMOD. Explain to people what NMOD is, and what it needs to become.
So the Environmental Modification Convention is the weather warfare ban of 1976 signed by the Soviet Union and the United States after Operation Popeye, the weather warfare in Vietnam.
Right.
And basically and this is a term that isn't even used lately. Luckily, the next international panel, Christian Osh has agreed to not call it geoengineering or weather modification, but call it environmental modification. Why? Because it's in the NMOD treaty. That's exactly the way they defined it.
Yeah.
And their definition of environmental modification is very broad, and that's why it's so important that you call it that. So what is NMOD? We'll jump into that. I'm going to share the screen real quick just so you guys can see this, and I will share the link in chat. So this is the actual treaty, and then after that, I'll share my solution to it because it has flaws. Everything has flaws. We all know that. But if you scroll, I'm gonna scroll all the way down here to where they have the actual here. And here we go. So each party of this convention undertakes not to engage in military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques. And this is the important part, having widespread, long-lasting, or severe effects as the means of destruction, damage, or injury to any other state party. State party meaning any country. So what does environmental modification mean? As used in Article 1, the term environmental modification techniques refers to any technique for changing through the deliberate manipulation of natural processes, the dynamics, composition, or structure of the Earth, including its biota, lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere, or of outer space. That means anything you do on purpose to screw with the Earth, the magnetic fields, anything living on the planet, anything in the atmosphere, all the way to outer space is considered environmental modification. So this convention shall not hinder the use of environmental modification techniques for peaceful purposes. This is why it's legal to do cloud seeding in America. Each country can still do that. Now, where you break the rules is when you actually go into screwing with somebody else's weather. So what you'll find is, and I've got a couple things down here, but in Mod Squad, this was an article that was written a while ago, and I think I have the original link right here from slate.com. Let me, no, that's just directly to him. Anyway, so they basically say, yeah, here's the original article. Could an obscure treaty protect developing countries from geoengineering gone wrong? This is from 2010. I told you I've been doing this a long time. share the link in chat. So, can NMOD protect us from geoengineering? Yes. However, NMOD is flawed. So, in order to actually protect us from geoengineering, we need to update the NMOD treaty. In addition to doing a federal ban on geoengineering, I'll get to that in a second. So, my solution is called the Environmental Modification Accountability Act. When you have a law that is broken and it doesn't work, how do you actually catch somebody doing weather warfare?
That's the hard part. That's the hard part.
So I put together a PowerPoint presentation. This is an act to end atmospheric experimentation without notification. We don't get told when they're doing any of this stuff, like releasing chemicals from cloud seeding, sounding rockets, tracer experiments, modification of pollution sources like alteration of effluent stacks. That's like coal-fired power plant, stacks, jet fuel doping, use of bunker fuel, any other technique that results in directly in cloud creation or control, magnetic or sonic energy like ionospheric heaters, lasers, cloud ionizers, resonance technologies, and a whole bunch more. Steering atmospheric rivers, all the things. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation covering all of this. Not going to bore you all the details, but you can read it on there. Who are the big players? What are the different technologies involved in geoengineering and weather control? And how we actually solve this problem. Number one, transparency. You got to tell us before you go screwing with the weather. Worldwide, period, full stop. If you don't notify the International Registry of Atmospheric Experimentation and it's not made available to the public, guess what? You're in deep crap. Because if an individual or organization engages in weather modification activity without notifying the registry at least 48 hours before, it may be considered hostile based on the severity and an NMOD violation. That's the whole purpose of the Environmental Modification Convention. So why don't we just ban weather modification altogether? A lot of people would say that. Well, bans don't work. The Limited Test Ban Treaty banned upper atmospheric nuclear explosions, but Kim Jong-un, Rocket Man, still shot off nuclear warheads. So best case, we build sensors to catch people. In the case of nuclear weapons, we have the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, which has the International Monitoring System, which is a bunch of infrasound recorders and seismographs that let us know when a nuke goes off. You can say guns are illegal, but criminals still going to criminal and they're going to have guns. So that's one of the big issues. I do like the way the states are going right now, because in the United States, a state can ban weather modification and enforce it. You can ban cloud seeding in your state and you can enforce it with hefty fines and or jail time. But you can't stop China. And China is literally altering the world's weather with their cloud seeding projects. Knowing is half the battle with transparency. The other half is verification. Trust but verify. We actually need sensors to be able to catch and detect clandestine military secret programs. I put a lot of thought into this. I promise you, this did not come easily. I've thought of every possible solution. Dr. James Roger Fleming read my solution. David Keith and Ken Caldera and Dr. James Roger Fleming, the top historian on weather warfare and weather modification, said that this is the only solution that can work. So I'm not tooting my own horn on this. You can read their own emails. I'll show them to you in a second. But building real-time sensors around the world, not just government sensors, but sensors you can buy and put in your own backyard to track weather modification in real time. And that way we can, act as a backup network for government sensors that just might be turned off. And real simply put, require notice up front with a registry. Catch bad guys with sensors. No fear. That's you. This is my solution.
Okay,
The environmental. modification
Okay,
account.
so I have to say, so that is the nefarious programs, climate change, weather wars, and so on. But then, how do we address the commercial aviation? Like, for instance, I'm doing the petition for rulemaking, so our agencies are actually doing their job. But what's the solution? Like, how do we deal with that?
You directly petition the FAA and the EPA, and
Right.
that's through the Clean Air Act, and that's what I was going over. That's where I was talking to John Fleetwood about this. Tennessee says it can't enforce chemtrail ban because federal Clean Air Act enforced by FAA won't let them. So I was kind of trolling him earlier today. We ended up talking on the phone for about an hour. He wants to learn way more. But he knows Monty Fritz. I know Monty Fritz. So we both have Monty's ear. And Monty just informed me this will be good news for everybody because nobody knows it yet. They actually we just passed House Bill 1112 in the House AG full today. Lots of pressure from the governor to stop the bill. The Lord granted us a victory today, and I said, I'll pray for you and God bless you, sir. Um, so they're still moving ahead with this, but the problem they're facing with the Clean Air Act is one that you can't get around. Because if you look at the way it's worded, they will not allow you to write regulations. And I thought I had them up here. It's right above that thing, actually. Right here. Yeah. So in this right here, you can see no state or political subdivision thereof may adopt or attempt to enforce any standard respecting emissions of any air pollutant from any aircraft or engine thereof, unless such a standard is identical to a standard applicable to such aircraft under this part. So
Yeah.
basically, it's written into the federal laws, and the federal laws trump state laws, no pun intended. So unless you actually get the EPA and the Clean Air Act to revise their emission standards, which they're very much inclined to align their emission standards to what the International Civil Aviation Organization has. And the reason why is because they want to make the U.S. airline industry profitable, and
Right.
it's basically it's profit over your health.
Well, exactly. So this is why we're petitioning to the FAA, EPA, and the Cal EPA. This is why we're doing that. But my question I go back to, can you, because we're already refining the jet fuel. Can we refine all, like how nano do you want to get? Can we refine all the nanoparticulate matter, all the soot, right? Do we limit flights? You can't fly more than, you have to take planes like, 500 miles or less. I mean, like, you know, that's my question is, can the fuel be refined? Are there certain limitations that happen? Like, this is, and as you're saying, if you want to change the planes themselves, that's 20 years out.
Well, Eileen's asking the question right there in chat: are there fuel patents, and what's going on with the fuel? And if you really look into it, and this is kind of the deep end of the pool that nobody really dares look at, um, they've always talked about in almost all of these. An exemplary technique may be via the jet fuel as suggested by prior work regarding metallic particles, stratospheric Welsbach seeding for the reduction of global warming 1991. I'll just hit the highlights. Contrail formation properties of aircraft exhaust plumes for different fuel sulfur content in the atmospheric conditions. Use of commuter aircraft with their jet fuels doped with aerosol generators. That's William Cotton at the American Meteorological Society, 2008. Seeding cirrus clouds and making more contrails. Perform wide area seeding with soot and carbonaceous aerosols, which would absorb solar radiation and warm cirrus layers enough to perhaps dissipate clouds. And that comes from jet fuel. Modification of cirrus clouds to reduce global warming. A potential delivery mechanism for seeding material is already in place. The airline industry dissolved or suspended in their jet fuel and later burned with the fuel, or injected directly into the hot engine exhaust. all of these are from geoengineers. This is literally Dr. Alan Robach, geoengineer, benefit, risks, and costs of stratospheric geoengineering. Addition of sulfur to the jet fuel or attachment of a nozzle to release sulfur from within its own tank. And the list just goes on and on. All of these stratospheric passenger flights are likely an inefficient geoengineering strategy. A little bit of pushback there, but the list goes on. Another technique examined was use of commercial passenger aircraft flying at high altitudes to inject sulfate aerosols emitted by aviation fuel into the stratosphere. This is Finland's FICA Cool project in 2015. Commercial aircraft could be used to deliver sulfur into the stratosphere. Applying high fuel sulfur content at aviation cruise altitude combined with ultra low sulfur jet fuel, biofuels on takeoff results in reduced aviation induced mortality. There's that word, Reinette,
Yep.
and increased negative radiative energy compared to baseline. What this is saying is use biofuels on takeoff to kill less people around airports, but once you get up to altitude, switch to a different fuel that's loaded with sulfur to geoengineer the planet. So how the hell would you do that? Use two different fuels in one tank. Oh, there's patents for that. I'll just skip to the end. There's way more documentation. And then all of this I put in MLA formatted references for, all of this. I could put it
Okay.
in a court of law, but I just want you to see this. Fuel system for vapor trail control.
Right.
Sulfur, and this is where they say 50 times the current level of sulfur to have a significant cooling effect. This is the FICA Cool project. This is William Cotton talking about, doped jet fuels doped with their aerosol generators from his PowerPoint presentation. Two jet fuels, one fuel tank for contrail control. This is the ice supersaturated regions Jeff talked about earlier. And here is the coup de grace control unit and method for controlling the supply of a vehicle with multiple fuels through the jet fuel electronic control unit. So they can use a doped jet fuel in these tanks and use a biofuel or something else in these tanks and then switch between fuel like an on-off switch. But them aren't chemtrails, Jim. Are they? I mean, what's your definition? So really, that's really where we're at with this. What's your definition of it and how deep down the rabbit hole are you willing to go?
So, okay. I mean, okay, you can have combined jet fuel. You can fly in certain areas where you won't have persistent contrails. You can use these patents to ensure there's not persistent contrails. I mean, we are petitioning the FAA and the EPA and so on. But it still seems to me that if they are really going to be dealing with this, it's still many years away, and we don't really have a solid answer solution.
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Was that a question?
It was.
Like, I saw 10 messages and I was like, oh God, somehow I stopped scrolling.
So no, so basically just, I mean, there's not like a real solid answer. It's like a combination. It's not a silver bullet. It seems like it's silver BBs essentially, right? It's got to be a
At the end of the day, they're trying to buy time. And what's going on is that the climate cult has come for the airline industry. Now that they know that the clouds they're making trap heat at the ground, the airline industry is in a contrail conundrum. They have to prove that their contrails are cooling, not warming, so that they can get carbon credits and carbon offsets so that the climate cult doesn't carbon tax them out of the sky.
Jeez.
So in the meantime, everything is literally about plane farts. We're not talking about cow farts anymore. It's the plane farts that are the problem. Oh, by the way, the clouds, the cirrus clouds they make, they trap more heat than the plane farts, the CO2. All of that's bogus. We all know that CO2 is plant food. You don't have greenhouse gases. You have a greenhouse. Many of you probably own a greenhouse. How does the greenhouse work? It is either plastic or it's glass, and it's shaped like this, and the sunlight comes in, and then it gets stuck inside, and it can't get out. The greenhouse is the cirrus clouds that are formed overhead. The heat comes in, it can't get out. They now know this. And the problem is they're trying to figure out very desperately how to get out of this before the public figures it out, because all the scientists have long since figured this out, since like 2010, when Ulrich Schumann said it to the ICAO. And when I said it to the EPA in 2015, it was still true. It's still as true when I said it then as it is today. They're in deep doo-doo and they have no solutions. The only solution they've been able to come up with is maybe we can do contrail avoidance and fly around the regions that Jeff was talking about earlier. We'll avoid contrail forming regions, and then we'll be able to claim we only made contrails when it was beneficial to the planet and it cooled the planet down. Therefore, you owe us carbon credits. And the carbon credits will offset the CO2 that our plane farts are making. So are we good? Climate cult, will you leave us alone? And that's really where we're at. They're at a stalemate. They're trying to figure out a solution because we're still decades away from Tesla planes.
Right.
You know, light enough batteries, electric engines, zero emissions. They may be on this net zero 2050, you know, zero emissions by 2050. But the airline industry, they're kind of screwed. They don't have a solution. And so even if you do go try to force the EPA to force a solution, the answer is going to be, we talked to all the scientists and none of them have a solution. And the biofuel thing, we tried that. It did not work. I interviewed Dr. Rangasai Halthori, who was in charge of the access flights and testing the biofuels. It did not work. So the one thing that they thought would work does not work. And I'm going to leave you with a warning. I said this in 2013. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because if you go complaining a whole bunch to the government, the scariest word you'll ever hear in your life is, we're from the government, we're here to help. So if you complain enough about this, guess what they're going to do? They're going to do the same thing the U.S. military does with their F-117s and their B-2 bombers and any of their stealth bombers that they don't want to create contrails. They're going to dump antifreeze out the back of a plane to make them melt away the ice. Think I'm kidding. Go look up contrail mitigation and what's it called? I'm forgetting the military jargon for this. But basically it's contrail mitigation systems and stealth fighters and stuff like that. Basically they will dump chemicals into the effluent stream, into the exhaust stream, so that ice cannot form. So what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with no clouds, and everybody will go, yay, we beat the chemtrails. But guess what? Now you have invisible trails, invisible chemical trails, possibly GMO chemtrails, biofuel GMO chemtrails, which are invisible, which are even worse for your health. So I have literally looked at every possible scenario of how this could go down. It could actually be worse if they go that route. They don't have a solution. I don't really have a solution. I'm not God, you know what I mean? I don't have it all figured out, but I at least know what the problem is. And I'd rather at least maybe somebody smarter than me will come along and say, hey, Jim, you know, I actually read your stuff. I now understand the problem. I've got a good solution and I'm all ears. You know, none of us have it all figured out, but we at least know what the problem is and we know what their answers are, and all their answers suck. And by the way, mine do too, when it comes to commercial aviation. So this is one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't move, you know, moments and movements.
Wow. I mean, the thing is that, I mean, it's almost like you have to go back to trains or something, but even then you need the tracks, you need the trains, you need the infrastructure, and
High-speed rail is the solution. In fact, they said that The latest studies say that the vast majority, upwards of 80% of contrail-induced cirrus clouds are from short-haul flights.
Yeah.
And that all of the long haul flights, especially the ones coming like across the transatlantic corridor, which are producing the most, stratospheric injection of aerosols, lower stratosphere, not 70,000 feet. Um, the short haul flights are the biggest problem. That's why we have so many flights per year.
Well,
But if we had high speed rail, why would you need that? And by the way, they don't make any pollution.
well, this
They're
is the thing is that I think it's going to have to be a combination of things. And I'm thinking through this, it's the takeoff and the landing that produces the most exhaust.
That's right. That's why the short haul flights are the
Short
worst.
haul. So this to me is why this education and correct information, you guys, and I'm going to be wrapping this up because we're way over time here. This is why it's really important to have very clear, concise, accurate information about what's going on in our skies. Because what it might have to be is it's not going to be the EPA, it's not going to be the FAA, it's not going to be legislation, it's going to be we the people realizing that we can't fly these short little stops, but we have to take the train or we drive or we just don't go or whatever. But my point is that it might be a cultural shift. We educate people to the point of like, look, do you want blue skies or do you not? Because your actions are producing the results. And I think one of the things psychologically that's very challenging about this is it's really easy to point the finger at the straw man, at the boogeyman, going, it's them, they're the bad guys. They need to stop poisoning us. But then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, my fingerprints are all over this crime. I'm actually responsible for blocking the sun from all the short flights that I take all the time. I mean, it might just have to be us going out there and educating the masses so we just don't take those short flights like we used to.
I used to say it like, I have an 15-year-old and an 8-year-old daughter. Airline industry, you're hashtag grounded. You know, these people need to be put on timeout. You know what I mean? Put in a corner, put the little cone of shame on them. And people need to be educated that if you don't like planes farting all over the sky and blocking out the sun, but you fly 7 times a week, you're the one who paid for the chemtrail program. Let's be real. I
Mhm.
mean, you got to be honest about that. And of course, the pushback would be, Jim, you sound like a WEF stooge. They're talking about taking away our ability to fly, and you're saying the same thing. I'm saying no, voluntarily opt out.
Yeah.
Take a drive. I don't personally fly because I get sick every time from aerotoxic syndrome. So if
Yeah.
you like breathing barium and all of the oils and lubricants that come in through the um, air systems, have at it. If you like rubbing your head on a seat that's covered in pesticides because they spray every flight with them to get rid of
Do.
the bed bugs and everything, have
Yeah.
at it. That ain't me.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I have to apologize. We did not get to the dust portion of what I was going to talk about. We'll get that in the next webinar.
And
I
I have to apologize too because I'm talky AF and Reinette knows this. Um,
no,
I can
I
count.
no, I'm really glad you're here because it's complicated and I can hit upon it, but not to the degree and the level that you can. And I really wanted you to come in here and just get more into the nitty gritty. And so I go back to the correct narrative is imperative for our work. And again, ego's not in it. We're not making money from this. I just want my blue skies. I want to know that towards the end of my life, I've been done something very productive like this. And I just want to say thank you to Jim and thank you to Jeff. You guys have very much been part of my learning curve. And I just want people to be open and not go looking for the straw man and the boogeyman and the worst case scenario and actually look like what's right in front of us and use the science. Prove it to yourselves. Go on to thewindy.com, get that contrail plugin, right? Go to all these different things like ClimateViewer on Substack, Jim Lee's Substack, where it talks about this is the kind of legislation that's going to make the difference. This is the legislation that'll give you the blue skies. That's what we need, but that comes with having the correct narrative and the correct information and the science backing it up. And that is what we've been really pushing for the last 2 years. And that's why it's imperative that we stay on point. So I just want to say thank you guys so very much. Bonnie, Joyce, Jay, Jim, all of you, Daryl, all of you, Fanny, Todd, it goes on, Brandy, thank you, Jim and Jeff especially, thank you guys. And we'll have another webinar. Actually, give me a second here.
Michael just spammed it.
Well, let me look because I'm actually going to be, oh, I will be here. Okay. So, yeah, the 26th of March. So, we'll have another one. We'll talk about the dust. We'll go into more details. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. This has been a long one, almost 3 hours, but this is really, really important information. And again, it's if we don't do it, it's not going to happen, and we got to do it right. So. Generally, what I like to do is everyone, if you can take your audio button in the bottom left-hand corner, and so turn it on, get rid of that little X across it, and I'd love to hear everyone's voice, and we can all say goodbye. Jeff and Jim, thank you guys so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
I want my mommy.
Thank you guys so very much, everybody. Thank you, Jeff and Jim.
Good
Thank
night
you.
from Eastern
Very welcome.
Zone. I'm
Yeah.
exhausted, but I'm glad I
You
came.
make it so personal, Reinette. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're my pleasure. It's my honor. And thank you, Jeff and Jim. They've been holding my hand. So thank you guys. And Michael, thank you for being here. Everyone, see you on the 26th. And I'll have a Reinette Senum Clear the Air this month here, like in the next week or two as well. I'll have that on my Substack. And please go out there, investigate, open your mind, and we got this. Do not be afraid.
Thank you for your calm.
You're so welcome. Bye, guys. Mwah, mwah.
Remember the spider webs too, because I really want to hear some more about that.
Okay, we'll have more updates. Bye, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Love you,
Mwah.
mean it.
Bye.
And maybe I'll see you this weekend.